Hello everyone, it is time for another live stream. Why don't I check really quickly, see what's going on while you guys enjoy the view of my coffee cup. I just want to see something really fast. I believe today is day 7 of the self-quarantining routine that we have all adopted. And I did want to talk about that, but let me check something really quick first. So, apparently this is our 121st live stream. So many live streams. It is crazy. So hi everyone, I'm sitting down for the moment. My lower back's been bothering me this week, and I don't know, I asked some Facebook friends, what should I do? And there's a lot of advice. And anyway, I don't know, I didn't do anything different. Everything is exactly the same. I didn't lift anything incredibly heavy. I didn't do some strange thing, but yeah, it's been bothering me. I'm gonna start off standing and then we'll switch to the chair if I have to. I threw on this shirt today since I just added Prodibio to my website. Finally, I've had the inventory hitting here for a while. I basically bought 2 of this and 1 of that and 3 of those because I didn't know how popular it would be. And then I thought, well, I got to get on the website, and I thought the moment I put it on there, people are going to buy it, and then there won't be any, and that's a terrible way to run a business. So I placed a huge order with Prodibio yesterday that should arrive next week. So right now, if you choose something, it may not go out on Monday, but hopefully by the end of the week it will. So I'd love your feedback also on what kind of things you think you'd want on a regular basis. So that's on the website. And in case you aren't familiar with my website, milasreef.com is my company. I run it from home, which is good this time of a health crisis because I don't have to go out and interact with anyone other than dropping off packages with FedEx. FedEx, UPS, the post office, they've all been releasing messages almost daily saying they're still in business, they're still delivering, they're essential to what mankind needs. So if you're concerned about the will you be that isolated to where you can't get anything? For now, we're good to go. And certain businesses are closed, others are being kept open, and it's been a really tricky situation, and I've been nervous about it, actually. So I remember when this first came out, when it first hit in China, and then they were locking down China. And I was watching these leaked videos from China on YouTube where they were welding the doors shut to apartment complexes to where the people in the apartment could not leave. I mean, they'd open the door like 4 inches and there would be a bar welded so they could not get the door open. And I kept thinking, what if that building catches fire? What if someone does something dumb in their apartment, like light a candle, and it causes a fire? Everyone's going to die in there. And I was kind of just like, I cannot believe this is actually happening. And then we've advanced since then, and it's become a global fear, which some people are still downplaying. Some people are like, I don't see the big deal, or it doesn't matter, it only affects old people. It affects everyone. And it affects the entire health industry to the degree that, there's only so many hospital beds in every hospital. And if everyone were to break out with the COVID-19 and, literally start heading south and have to go to a hospital, they'd be turned away. There's not enough beds. So it's really good that we are staying inside and staying safe and reducing how many people catch it, because that way they will have there'll be less numbers of people going to the hospital at one time, and they can kind of treat them in waves rather than having this massive amount where it just collapses the entire method, and it runs rampant. And the numbers, they keep getting updated every single day. But they were saying that if this much % of the United States got infected, it would be this many people, which I don't know. Let's just I'm pulling numbers out of the air. Let's say it was I don't know, 137 million people. Okay, so they all have it, but are they all going to be sick and die? No. But as much as up to 8% of that number could die, which was still like 1.2 million people. So it is actually a big deal. And those that are saying it's not, I actually kind of chastise them a little bit, because I just feel like, why not be cautious instead of being rebellious and just say, oh, I'm going to do what I want, I'm going to go where I want. I mean, I had a guy come to my house yesterday, and he just said, I'm not going to catch it. And I just said, okay. And he said, I'm working on it from within. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm still not shaking your hand. I am going to be as careful as I can be to keep myself healthy during this time of what basically is crisis. So, and there's different countries, and that was the other thing. This argument came up, like a week ago, and people were saying it was being overblown by the media. But they also, one person had a great post that I shared because he was saying that he felt that if media really was the problem behind it, if they were really blowing it out of proportion like, they're being accused of, why is it all the media on the entire planet is blowing it out at the same time? If it was really a U.S. media thing, I was like, oh, they're just trying to freak us out, and because it makes people tune into the news. It's in every country. And I just found out that Fiji, where the corals come from, now where some of our fish may have come, did come from, where our live rock used to come from, they now have it on their island. They've locked down the island and closed everything. And Mexico told all employees to go home for 3 weeks. And a lot of the people in Mexico don't have internet, is what I'm told. So, you might think, oh, they can work from home. Well, not if they don't have internet in their home. And Canada apparently closed their borders, which, technically this weekend, I was supposed to be in Niagara Falls Coral Show. And a week ago, it was canceled and postponed until mid-July. And then 2-3 days later, there was the news, no one's coming into Canada. I was like, so glad I did not fly up there, and I'd be stuck where I can't come home. Or even worse, I read the story where people were trying to come through customs to come back into the United States, and they all had to be tested, and it was a 9-hour wait. And forget 9 hours, which sucks. That's ridiculous. That's just to get through customs. Then you have to catch the plane you missed because you can't connect to your next flight. No, even worse is that you're spending 9 hours surrounded by people that potentially could be sick, that could be carrying it. And we definitely don't want to risk that. And I'll tell you this is the other thing. Sorry, my laundry's finishing. I cannot stop touching my face. I am doomed. They say don't touch your face, and it's like it's itching all the time now. Just because I know I can't touch it, I think I touch it twice as much. I don't know about you guys. Matter of fact, I would love to hear from some of you guys the things you're doing, the things you can't overcome. Are you the same with you can't touch your face? Or are you doing anything different in the kitchen? Are you cooking anything special, or is it just a regular day for you? Are you doing anything fun or different in your home that you've never done before? I shared a really cool video on my personal page on Facebook last night about a group of people that, since they can't get into Disney World because Disney World is closed, they reenacted getting on the ride for Pirates of the Caribbean through their home. And they played the music, and they had people doing stuff in the background, just like the mechanical characters in the ride. And they had, how at one part in Pirates of the Caribbean you go down a sluice of water really fast? Well, they went down their staircase. And it was really well done. I was really impressed. And, these people were, being creative, and they were dressed up. They were really going all in on this idea to, pass the time at home. So I'm curious what you guys are doing to pass the time. For me, I've been working nonstop. Matter of fact, I can't even keep track of what day it is. Yesterday, I was sure it was Saturday, but I thought, but I didn't do a live stream, so what day is it, And, but no, I've been working all week, getting orders out as quickly as I can, bringing more inventory in, trying to keep filling your orders because, you guys are helping me continue to eat. And so I really do appreciate the business that you give me. I do want to mention, this is our live stream. We're 10 minutes in. For the next 50 minutes, and this is the thing, if you say you want this and you're not here 50 minutes from now to say, here is my address, we can't help you. So we've been doing this for several weeks now. And every week I've been giving away a few issues of Coral Magazine. And so Coral Magazine is an excellent publication, and today I'm going to read to you one news story out of the latest issue. But this is a subscription that can come in the mail to your mailbox, or you can buy the e-subscription where you download it. And these are $37 a year for 6 issues. And I noticed on the little card, which came out of the magazine, that it said if you buy 3 years worth, it's $90. So it's $30 a year. Now, if you're up in Canada, I didn't know these things. If you're up in Canada, they add an extra $12 probably for postage. And if it's going internationally, it's $20 extra for international shipment. These are also published in, I'm almost certain these are published in German, because Daniel Knopp is the guy that started this magazine. He's in Germany. And this is our English version. So if you're interested in getting a copy for free, I will mail it to you. I will pay for the postage. And you need to let us know so that Andrea can pick 5 of you to get an issue. I'm also thinking about the possibility of getting Coral Magazine to send me a few issues each time it rolls out to put in my shop for someone that might just want to buy 1 copy. What do you guys think of that? Is that a good choice? I mean, according to the front of it, it sells for $7.99, so $8. You know, would you buy one for $8 from my website just because you weren't able to get it, or you want to try it once? I don't know. It just kind of popped in my head today. But I thought, oh, maybe I should have this on hand for the very few people that would like to just buy one while they're buying RODI filters, or they're buying carbon, or they're buying a Versa pump, or whatever it is they buy. So. And by the way, I see a lot of the stuff going on in the chat right now. Let me catch up really quick, and then I'll continue, because I'm always so far behind on the chat that probably the people that talked are long gone. Mike Mucker says, what do you think of my dosing container with a syringe and check valve I posted on Club Milo's Reef? I thought it was a great idea. And what he basically did was he created a little container that was sealed at all times, ran a tube to the bottom, and put a syringe on the top. And as he draws out solution, he never opens the lid. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then after he's drawn out the solution he needed and squirted in the tank, he would put a syringe back in the top to keep it sealed. And I thought that was pretty clever. I liked it. Plus, sometimes it's hard to draw solution out of a bottle because your syringe isn't long enough. So with his method, with the hose going to the bottom, he should have the ability to remove fluid all the way from the very bottom. So that was something he did in Club Milo's Reef. And that is a group on Facebook that I've been running for the last, I don't know, we're coming up on 2 years. We're probably like a year and 9 months or something like that. And the group has probably 7,000 members at this point. And I have been approving a lot of people lately. As soon as I find time in my schedule to do so. I think I added another 200 people or so to the group. The group is really good because it answers your questions. It helps you share your tank with others. It lets us help you identify things you don't recognize in your aquarium. So it's a really good group. It's very positive. I don't allow negativity in there. If you're going to put people down, if you're going to insult them, if you're going to name call them, you're not going to be there. I mean, it's just the whole world is full of horrible people, so we have one really nice group, and we all hang out in there, and it's very chill. Hopefully it's upbuilding. Hopefully you like it. And if it's too Disneyland for you, and you can't stand it, and you feel like it's just not reality, then you can leave too. I mean, you can just say, this is not for me. But I want to make a spot where everyone that's new can feel safe to ask their questions and not feel like they're going to be berated or made fun of. I actually called a friend the other day and said I need help with something. And because I didn't know how to do something, and I told him when he was showing me how to do everything over FaceTime, thank you so much for not mocking me and making fun of me and making me feel bad, because I just want to know how to use this, and I didn't have the experience. And so he talked me through it, and that was really nice. So, that's really how the group is as well. We try to answer your questions. We understand there's going to be strong opinions on things, and that sometimes it's almost like the original poster isn't really listening. That's okay. We just hope to hopefully reason with you and help you understand what would make your outcome better if you'll apply the question. I mean, once you ask the question, you are asking for help. If you're not asking the question, you're just showing what you've got, then we'll just say that's really cool, or we'll keep scrolling. That's pretty much it. So anyway, if you haven't joined the group, and it's funny, I see a lot of comments, because when you're joining the group, there's 3 questions you have to answer. And sometimes, people say, I've been watching the live stream, I've never missed an episode, and I'm joining the group now, and I'm thinking, well, I've talked about this group on every episode for 19 months. It's like, how are you not joined sooner. Why are you just joining now? But that's okay. I mean, sometimes people are listening while they're driving. They're not on their computer. They don't think about it. So when they get on Facebook, they're just doing their Facebook thing, and they don't think to go into Club Melus Reef. But it's a great group. Chris says, what is your take on SPS showing mesenterial filaments? Is it good, bad, a feeding response? It could be all of the above. It's not necessary. Well, I'm not going to say it's bad because it's not. It's a triggered response by the coral. It could be a response to adding amino acids to the water. It could be a response to food in the water. It could also be a response that the pH has spiked really, really highly and the coral is super stressed. It could also be a response that there's a neighbor nearby and they are duking it out between the two of them, trying to fight for territory. So it just depends on the circumstances in your tank. But to see them, and you know, I have a coral down here in Acan in the bottom, right in that bottom corner right there, and it puts out these mesenterial filaments every single night as a feeding response. And it's very interesting. It's very brown and furry, and if it had anything nearby to snack on, it would consume it. And I've watched it hammer at a few corals in the past. Dave says, how are you liking the Ecotech Versa so far compared to the Comore FX STP peristaltic pump? The Versa was lying on its back on the edge of my sump for probably 2 weeks, feeding water from the sump into the calcium reactor. And there was this weird sound coming out of it. And I thought, well, all right. But when I made that wooden stand a week ago and hung it, it completely became quiet. And I was like, huh, what do you know? And it's just because I didn't have anywhere really ideal to hang it at the time. So that's why I made the stand. And it's made it completely quiet. It's doing exactly what I want it to do. And I'm very pleased with its operation. And it's quieter than my Comore was. So now the Comore started off really quiet. As it aged, it got louder. And so I was getting to that point where I was annoyed. And so replacing it with Versa was a good choice for me. I do have the Versa pumps in stock if you guys are looking to get one. All right, so what I want to do, let me answer a couple more things. I want to do like 5 things today. All right, let's see. CJ says, I have a brown slime or film all over the sand bed. It came basically overnight. Nothing is in my tank seems to be bothered by it. Any ideas as to what it is and how to fix it? I'd post it in Club Melus Reef. I'd turn off the blue lights, use some white lights, and let's see pictures of it. It could be a couple of different things, but without knowing exactly what we're looking at, it's impossible to really give you advice on that one. You said it's overnight. You didn't say how old the tank was. You know, give us a bunch of details in Club Melus Reef, and we'll help you out. Man, a lot of good comments in here. I hate to just scroll past them, but you know, I did ask you guys questions. Okay, Nozilla says, do you think MACNA is still on for this year, or will it be canceled as well? I would assume that it's still on because it's late August, but you know, we'll have to see. I'm wondering if Comic-Con, which I go to every July in San Diego, is going to be canceled until the next year, because that's not an event. I mean, that's such a huge event, and it's like the end of July. They can't just move it a few months. There's just too much involved. There's so many people that attend. They have like 120,000 people attend every year. And to move 120,000 people to a later date, I don't see how that's going to work. But again, we're going to have to see what happens. Some of my friends mentioned here, and I just saw this one message by someone saying that they're... Where did it go? Ugh. I scrolled too fast. I lost it. Oh, here it is. My sister is an RN in Las Vegas. She's not having a good time. I heard Las Vegas was closed. I mean, like all the entertainment things were closed, and that's nationally. You know, a week ago they were closing Broadway to any large audiences, and then Vegas was closed, and people were being laid off. And I heard the casinos were staying open, which I thought was weird. But then I heard later this week that Starbucks had removed all the chairs indoors and outdoors. If you wanted to go in, you had to get it to go. And then when I went in there yesterday just to see with my own eyes, because I couldn't believe it, all the chairs were stacked against the wall and you could not sit down. And there was no chairs outside, just like I had heard. And the employees said that they were about to close all lobbies and you'd have to go through drive-thru to get your coffee. And there was even a possibility that they might just say, we're just closing the store entirely. So there's a lot of businesses that are suffering. My friend runs a dive shop in Maui, in Hawaii. And it has been devastating to her business. There was, and I mean, not only are people not coming to dive, they're asking for refunds what they already paid for, and it's really, really hard to keep the doors open on that business with a zero. And then I just heard, early this morning that they were even saying no commercial diving was allowed or something. I don't know. It was something along those lines, like anyone commercial has to cease immediately. So if you were on vacation in Hawaii, I don't know what you're going to do because you're not allowed to do anything. What are you going to do? Stay in your, and I heard there's like a 2-week quarantine once you get to Hawaii. So then, what are you going to do in your hotel room for 2 weeks? I don't know. It's awful. Let's see. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to change gears. I wanted to talk to you guys about a couple different things that happened in Coral Magazine because I thought it was really cool. The first one I got to find. Unfortunately, this is going to take me a minute. Let me go to videos. And I need to go back like a solid year. I think it was like February of last year. That's November. Oh my God. This is... Oh. Maybe it's around here. What's the date on this? January? I feel like it was February. What date is this? Oh, it's still January. Well, maybe I'm in the wrong year. Let's try the year before. October. May. Sarah, I'm not trying to waste your time. I'm just trying to locate this. March. Oh, speaking of mesenterial fibers, let's show you these. I'll go to... Turn this off. So there's some on my ACAN that come out late at night, almost every single night. And here's some more. And then those get sucked back into the mouths. Isn't that weird? And it's not damaging itself, and it's not bad for the coral. Okay, let me see if I can find what I was looking for, because it was really interesting, and I was like, oh, I got to find that video. And then, of course, the live stream started, and I wasn't ready. Let's see, what is that? Oh, man, where is it? I hate that. All right, well, I might just have to do this without the video I wanted to show you. How annoying. Could have sworn it was in February. I wish I'd uploaded it to YouTube when I did, when I filmed it, because I could then find it really quickly. But, all right, well, I might go hunting for it a little bit later. Let me, in the meantime, tell you the story. So, in this issue of Coral Magazine, this is the January-February 2020 issue. And in this issue, one of the first stories I found here when I opened it up I was super surprised to find a creature in there that I'd seen in person. So it was this article, and it says here, a new acropore-eating flatworm is discovered. So all these little purple dots are flatworms. And they literally move like a worm. They're completely purple, and they crawl over the coral. And Frank's Tanks down the street from me, the fish store that I go to, had these horrible flatworms. And he didn't know what they were. He called them black bugs. And I said, they're purple. They're not even black. Why are you calling them black bugs? And he just said, well, you know, they're awful. And so I was actually at his store looking at these things. I was studying them really closely. I filmed them. That's why I was trying to find the video to show you guys. Of course, that would be too easy. And when I was looking at them, I thought, Frank, lend me your nice camera. I'll take some good macro shots and I'll get some help. And then I realized I have an iPhone in my pocket with a really good camera. So I took some video at the time and posted it and asked people, what do you think it is? And no one had an answer. And then to find it in the January issue of Coral, I was like, that's wild. I mean, obviously, when you find a pest, something new, you assume everyone's seen it and it's just, you know, no one's really put an ID to it. But this thing came out of nowhere and no one knew what it was. And it was listed in this issue of Coral. So if you are not a subscriber to Coral, you're not benefiting from the latest knowledge that you could gain. And I was really excited to see something that I had seen a year before being explained in this issue. And at the time, they didn't really have any cures for it either, by the way. Frank's approach to solving it was to go ahead and remove all the corals from the tank and just keep it down to rock for a while and put the fish back in. And then he set it up again, and they came again, so he did it a second time. And I was like, man, I mean, because that is the nuclear choice, to go all in and just say, I'm just going to rip everything out of the tank because I have a pest. I've always felt like, tackle the pest, don't destroy the reef. But now his tank has none, which is good. But he did lose corals in the process. I'm annoyed that I can't find it for you guys. When I do find it, I'm just going to I'll probably end up sticking on Critter ID, and that way you can watch the video because I'll find the clip and I'll edit it and stick it on there and tell you guys a little bit about it. But that was a really cool thing that I wanted to show you in that issue. And then this is the new issue that I got in the mail yesterday, Spiny Wonders. So this is the March-April edition. And I wanted to share with you a positive news story. So I am going to actually read to you this news that's taking place over in Australia, because as you know, the Great Barrier Reef recently took another hit where a ton of corals bleached. And if you hadn't seen it yet, it's really bad. And so this story, Reef News, is entitled, Coral Biobank Launched, Stockpiling Stony Coral Species for an Uncertain Future. And I want to share this with you because I felt like it was a really important thing to hear about and to learn more about and to know that it's going on. Because a lot of us, we buy a coral and we put it in our tank, and we might know some nickname like Jason Fox Pink Fuzzy Acro. You know, it's just a name. And it doesn't tell us what species it is. It doesn't tell us where it came from. You know, there's no details. But the guys in Australia felt like they should do more. So here's the story. Last year, when scientists on an expedition to the northern Great Barrier Reef discovered that a direct hit by Cyclone Trevor in March 2019 had obliterated one of Australia's richest remaining hotspots of stony coral diversity, it added a special urgency to call for someone to do something. Once extreme predictions that the world's coral reefs could be forever lost within the lifetime of today's children were sounding more and more prophetic. Faced by this and wave after wave of bad news in recent years, a new initiative based in Australia has set out to build the world's first virtual ark of living corals with a goal of stocking a genetic bank of hundreds of species in the coming years. The vision includes broodstock colonies housed in hurricane, cyclone, and typhoon-proof facilities, as well as a global network of legacy stony corals kept in public aquariums, research facilities, and in the reef tanks of expert small system reef keepers. It's an ambitious project, enormous in scope, and in the face of daunting challenge. Increasingly frequent extreme weather events and climate change loom as global threat to tropical corals, which some observers believe are on the brink of an era of mass extinctions. A core group of scientists and their backers in Australia are thinking big, planning an unprecedented living inventory of every species of coral on the Great Barrier Reef and many from around the world. They are calling it the Coral Biobank. And the project is organized by Great Barrier Reef Legacy, an environmental nonprofit organization based out of Port Douglas, Queensland, Australia, whose mission is the protection and stewardship of coral reef systems worldwide. GBR Legacy, with a growing array of corporate and nonprofit backers, is working with two major partners: Corals of the World, which is an excellent set of books by Dr. Charlie Varon, Dr. Charlie Varon's exhaustive online database of coral taxonomy, and Cairns Marine, Australia's largest marine life collector and supplier, to lay the foundation of the bank. Seed money for the project has come from an anonymous Dutch foundation, while land is being acquired and plans developed for a secure living corals repository in Port Douglas, a coastal town on the Coral Sea, 40 miles north of Cairns, Queensland, a dive and sailing mecca serving the Great Barrier Reef. So here's a picture of some of the corals, and it says the Coral Biobank is founding team. You've got John Rumney, Dr. Charlie Varon, and Dr. Dean Miller, after successfully collection dive on the Great Barrier Reef. The two-part plan is both simple in concept and demandingly broad in execution. Scientists will attempt to collect and record samples of every single hard coral species found on the 133,000 square miles of Great Barrier Reef and get them into secure terrestrial indoor settings in Queensland. Once this step is complete, they will farm out backup fragments of each species to public aquaria and other institutional aquatic facilities, as well as home aquarists who have joined the program. In the Great Barrier Reef Legacy Lab, and am I saying that right, Gabe? Yeah, I got it right. I want to make sure GBR I'm saying is correct. And in public and private tanks, scientists hope that the captive corals will be able to live for decades while the reef rides out the ravages of climate change. The project faces countless unknowns, but the founders of GBR Legacy and the Coral Biobank believe that the preserved stocks of corals must be ready for a future when damaged or denuded reefs need to be reseeded with reef-building scleractinians. Dr. Dean Miller, Managing Director at GBR Legacy and head of the Coral Bank Project, is spearheading the effort. He says that by the end of 2020, GBR Legacy plans to have 200 species of coral from the Great Barrier Reef in the biobank. This number represents about half of the known species on the Great Barrier Reef and about a quarter of the world's hard coral species. By the end of 2025, according to Miller, GBR Legacy plans to have all 800 species of the world's described stony corals represented in the biobank, thereby ensuring we have safely secured the living biodiversity of hard corals. Did you know that there's 800 different hard corals on the Earth? Details of the plan are still emerging, but the organizers say that the backup fragments should be ready to ship out to public aquaria and enterprising home aquarists by the end of 2020. Now I'm just going to quickly say, I hope that the people that are hoping to preserve and protect some of these corals are legit, hobbyists, not somebody that just wants a frag. Because that's not right. It's one thing to say, I want to help, I'm going to do something, I'm going to supply all the life support that coral needs. And it's another thing to just say, oh, I want something from the Great Barrier Reef, I'll put it in my tank, that's fine. And I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just trying to be honest. I would, even myself, not everything in my tank is bulletproof. And I lost one acro last week, and I was like, okay, what happened? What if it was one of the ones from the GBR Legacy? I'd feel terrible. So, we have to be really serious about who is actually going to get these corals in home aquaria. But that doesn't mean we can't, because we know a lot, and it mentions that in the story here. Cairns Marine, which supplies marine life to public aquaria all over Australia, has a reputation as a staunch proponent of sustainable collection and responsible captive maintenance of reef animals. They're helping with the project by building long-term holding systems for the broodstock corals and housing the broodstock colonies that are being brought into the program. Miller, a marine biologist and filmmaker, likens the biobank to a data backup system, where corals from reefs around the world are the natural system and represent the original data set, while the Living Coral Biobank facility in Australia will be the first full backup system housing all known hard coral species worldwide. Public aquaria, academic facilities, and individuals who receive and house the coral frags will be what Dr. Miller calls the secondary and crucial backup system. We acknowledge that home aquarists have really paved the way for this project, says Dr. Miller, honing their skills and techniques for how best to keep corals alive indefinitely. And so we thank them for their support in this project and, of course, their participation in ensuring we can maintain the full living biodiversity of the world's corals. GBR Legacy says that the individuals actively involved with the new biobank will be leading scientists, reef managers, industrial experts, community partners, and the general public. So who will get a piece of the reef? For aquarists interested in housing a fragment of the coral for the Living Coral Bank, what Dr. Miller of GBR Legacy calls potentially the largest citizen scientist project ever, there is a registration form available at the online site below, which is included here in the article. Coral fragments will be ready to ship by the end of 2020, and international shipping will be available so that, in Dr. Miller's words, anyone anywhere can receive a biobank fragment. He adds, we are extremely excited to see where corals end up and to regularly check in on them through our registered participants' photos, videos, and updates. If keeping a frag isn't your dream, you can still support the project. Over the course of 2020, GBR Legacy will be accepting monetary donations through their website to help fund this massive effort. Dr. Miller explains, for the first phase of this project, that is collecting and storing the first 200 Great Barrier Reef species, we can distribute them to public and home aquarists. We need to raise 500,000 Australian dollars or $335,000 US dollars. GBR Legacy has both US and Australian tax deductible status. And then it shows Dr. Charlie Varon hunting broodstock corals on a patch of the Great Barrier Reef. So I just thought that's really cool because we've heard about seed banks that have seeds for all the foods on the planet. I saw a whole like a James Bond movie about that where they had all these protected like deep in a mountain, in a vault, and of course the bad guy is trying to destroy it. And so having some kind of a coral biobank that would hold every kind of species so we don't have any extinctions would be fantastic. And to have backups in other aquariums, public aquariums that are massively, those guys check the water of their tanks every single day. And some hobbyists as well. I see it as a great step forward in protecting what we have today so that we don't have to lament 20 years from now that we just don't have it anymore. So let's, I wanted to share that one with you. Also, I wanted to tell you this, because I flipped through the whole issue this morning while I was drinking my coffee. And there's some excellent stories in here, but the one that caught my eye was this one little item, and I was just like, I wonder if everyone knows this, or did anyone know this? So they showed a whole bunch of urchins, and this one urchin right here that is super pretty, looks like a bunch of flowers. It's called a, I can't say this, Toxopnustidae. I saw it. They also call it a flower urchin. It's actually super venomous. And it said that, oh, yeah, here it is. So here's a close-up of the polyps, or polyps? The back of the urchin. What the flowers on this urchin? It says has caused human fatalities. This genus has 4 species that most aquarists would do well to avoid. So if you didn't know that there's an urchin out there that can kill you, it's in this issue of Coral Magazine. So I wanted to share that with you guys because I was like, wow, I had no idea. All right, so let me jump into some more of your questions and then we'll go to the next topic. Coral Lover says, I installed my new calcium reactor 2 weeks ago. It's running great. pH is in the reactor 6.6 to 6.7. It's running 70 milliliters a minute. Sounds a lot like mine. My DKH was 8.5 when I started, and now it's 7.7. Calcium's 480. What can I do? You are going to want to set your pH level a little bit lower. Try doing 6.5 to 6.6. And then in 3 days, measure your alkalinity again. Because by melting more of the media in the reactor, it will put out a higher alkalinity coming out. The other thing you can do is you can measure the alkalinity coming out of the calcium reactor by collecting the effluent into a beaker and then do an alkalinity test kit. And you want to be measuring somewhere between 19 and 35 DKH. So if it's less than that, that could be why the alkaline in your tank is dropping. Zafish Guy says, my first saltwater is a Nuvo 60 gallon that was up for 14 months now, and all 11 fish are growing and doing well. My 5 corals, which are 4 LPS and an encrusting Monty, are not growing, but surviving. Is that bad? No, it's not bad, but there has to be a question why the corals are not doing a little bit more. Now, LPS, I don't really think of them as a fast-growing coral because, I mean, I've had these hammers in this tank for 6 years, and you don't see, like, a wall of hammers. So I would say that as you know, the Monty would be more of a indicator because that encrusts over the rock and spreads out as it continues to grow. But sometimes we have corals in our tank that sit very stagnant. They just sit there and they live, but they don't grow any bigger. And then suddenly at some point, like, you know what, I feel like growing. I'm going to do this now. And you start to see a burst of growth. Or you might see some new color that you hadn't seen in a while. And that's always a good indication. But it can be extremely frustrating when you put something in your tank and it just never seems to get any bigger. It just sits there and you're like, wow, I bought this frag. I thought by now I'd have a bigger piece. And take my own tank, for example. I've got a small frag that was a dot of Walt Disney Acropora. And I've had it now in my tank for about 2 years. And the entire thing turned green, and basically all it did was cover the frag plug, and it didn't make a bunch of branches. And other people are growing things into, you know, a softball size, and mine's just sitting there doing nothing. It's just stagnant, but other corals are growing. So, you know, it happens to all of us. I wouldn't be too upset about it. As always, we want to analyze what is going on with the tank that could potentially be holding back growth, and that could be water temperature. For example, does your tank get too cold late at night while you're asleep? You might want to double check, make sure that the flow is the right strength all night. Like I had a friend who had a real problem with corals growing. And when I was analyzing all of his stuff inside, I don't know how I did it. I don't know if I was in his Apex Fusion or if I was in EcoSmart Live. But I asked him, why is your temperature so cold every single night for like 15 hours? And then finally the tank is warm enough for like 6, 8 hours. And then it starts dropping off again. And we identified it that he was actually telling his return pump to slow way, way down at night, like to go down to, I don't know, 20% flow. And because it was going so slowly through the sump and back up to the tank, the warm water in the sump had cooled off before I got to the tank. And so the tank got cooler and cooler and cooler. And then every day, the pump ramped up for the daytime to, let's say, 60%, 70% flow. And all that warm water came up and the tank warmed up. And then every night it cooled back down really, really low to like 72 degrees, 73 degrees. And so I said, why don't you just set that return pump to 70% all the time and quit messing with it? And so he did, and all of a sudden corals were growing. So it could be something as mundane as you just arbitrarily picked something like, I'm going to slow down the pump at night while the corals are sleeping. And that might be a disservice to your tank. But that's just a possibility. I mean, maybe it's something else. Mike Flores says, any suggestions on re-aquascaping a tank? And let's see, what are we doing? Okay, we got 16 more minutes of choosing 5 people to get an issue of Coral Magazine. So I want to remind you guys, and you have to let Andrea know you're interested, and then she will pick 5 people. And you have to be here at the end when she picks you so she can reach out to you for your mailing information. Any suggestions on re-aquascaping a tank? Whatever you can do, I recommend you avoid what looks like man-made brickwork or like a produce cart at the supermarket. You know those carts that are like all the oranges are stacked up and all the tomatoes are stacked up and all the strawberries are stacked up. You want to avoid that shopping cart look, and you want to avoid what looks like brickwork. Nature hates a straight line, so having everything completely level across the top, it's not appealing to our eye. It might look very modern or functional, but it's not natural. So we want to aquascape in a way where it looks natural. You want to have caves, you want to have swim-throughs, you want to have some negative space, which means nothing is there, so it looks empty for things to swim into or things to grow out in. You don't want your rockwork to be too tall, because if it's too high up, when the corals on top start to grow, they run out of water. So we want to make sure that your aquascape is down low enough that when you put the corals on top, they have 6, 8, 10 inches of growth upward. And plus you have some open area along the top for your fish to swim. So those are some thoughts. The rule of thirds is really important when it comes to aquascaping. I really believe, and always have, that women are great at aquascaping. They just have a natural inclination for it. So if you're frustrated with your rock work and you're a guy, you might ask your girlfriend, your spouse, your daughter, what do you think? What could I do different? And maybe they'll help you move like 3 or 4 different rocks, and all of a sudden the tank looks a lot better. So that might be worth a shot. Okay, so I asked a question before of you guys, and some of your answers, I'm reading them here. I wanted to know if any of you guys are doing anything special when it comes to cooking. Like right now, this time, being stay at home. Did you go out and buy anything really unusual that you were going to cook that you normally don't, but now you've got the free time to do all the prep work? I mean, think about all the work we go to. Preparing a Thanksgiving meal, and it's like an all-day affair, and we're baking pies, and we're baking or roasting a turkey, and there's all these side dishes. Are you doing anything nutty like that? Or are you just staying basic to like Pop-Tarts and cereal and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? I was curious where you guys were. Myself, when I went to the market last Monday, I went to this little market. It's called Aldi. It's not one of the big chains. I mean, they're all over the place, but they're little tiny markets, and everything in there is off-brand. They're not, like, you're not going to see Oreos. You're going to see like Orneos. There'll be a slight name change. It doesn't quite taste like the original either, but it's good enough for me. And I was able to buy several breads, which was good. I was able to get cheese and dairy and produce. And I also got myself some chicken breast, and I bought hamburger meat and turkey meat that I could freeze. Now, the chicken breasts, would seem like a simple thing, but last night it was late and I was hungry, and so I used something that a friend of mine recently gave me, which was a type of rub that you take the chicken and you wash it off in the sink so it's clean, dry it off, pat it dry, and then I put avocado oil, which I'd never even heard of, and several people are like, oh yeah, avocado oil. I've never heard of this. I've heard of cooking oil. I've heard of corn oil. And never heard of avocado oil. So anyway, I found a bottle at Aldi, and I applied it liberally all over the chicken breast on both sides. And then I put this rub, which is a whole bunch of spices in this jar. And I just completely coated it. And then he said, leave it on the counter for 40 minutes and let all that stuff soak into the chicken breast. And so I did. And then I threw it on the grill. So late last night, I think it was 11 o'clock at night, I'm grilling chicken breast. And I'm social distancing, and I'm making food that'll last me a few days. And I really enjoy that product he gave me, that spice. And it's interesting. I don't know what's in it. I mean, I'm sure there's something on the label. But what you taste is like when you eat a piece of chicken, and after it goes down, in your mouth, you still have the taste in your mouth as if you just had barbecue potato chips. And it's delicious. It's really good. And I'm really excited I learned this new thing to make, because I've always done chicken breast the same way. I thaw it out, I put lemon pepper, and I put garlic salt, and I just grill it. I don't even put barbecue sauce. And this has been a really nice change of pace for me. So I was wondering if you guys are doing anything special or different or fun. Are you baking cakes? Are you making cupcakes for your children? Or what are you doing in your homes right now to kind of make life more bearable while we're a little bit frustrated that we can't live our normal life? That we can't be at work or can't be out at social engagements like sporting events and music concerts and things like that. Ron says, I'd like to start a refugium in the middle compartment of my all-in-one. Would I need anything besides light and the Ketomorpha? Well, you want to make sure that the Ketomorpha has flow going through it, but that it can't continue and end up getting sucked into the return pump of that third compartment, because then it would stop flow and everything in your tank is relying on flow. So you might need to put it in some type of I'd call it a cage. You might make something out of egg crate. You could maybe make something out of needlepoint fabric, which is like a plastic with a lot of holes, and you might cut the holes bigger. like cut out every square so that the squares are larger and create this thing that you can drop in. But that's pretty much it. A lot of people have actually modified a hang-on back filter, and they took out all the guts and they made it a little hang-on back refugium. So it's sort of along those lines. It's very small. You don't have a lot of room, so it may not make a huge difference for you, but yeah, it's still something you can definitely do. Oh, that's nice. Charles says that he's baking his own bread. Can't find any in Phoenix. Wow. This is interesting. So Emmanuel says, I leave my boxes from Reef Gear that I bought outside and wash my hands every time I unpack a box. According to FedEx, they believe that it's unlikely, and FedEx shared the story, but I'm sure someone else told them, they feel it's unlikely that you'll get any of the infection from someone holding a box and handing you the box. Like the box isn't going to carry over the transmission. So I thought that's kind of good to know. A lot of people are doing the, getting things dropped off at their door, whether it's Uber Eats or a pizza delivery or something like that, or they're getting shipments. And like I said, the post office, FedEx, and UPS, all three are saying we're continuing to deliver. And so we have things coming in. If you're super concerned, you could put on gloves before to bring it inside. But you got to take the gloves off instantly, because if you think about this, you open the door, you put on your glove, or gloves too, because it's a big box. You open the screen door with your gloved hand, you reach down and you get the box, and you're holding the door open with your elbow, so it's okay. And then you bring the box in, odds are you're going to want to close the door. Now, you might close the door with your foot, or you might take the handle and close it. You just touch the box with your gloved hand, and now you touch the handle. Then later on, when you open the door to go out or do something, whatever was on your glove is now on the doorknob. And that's just one example. And if you adjust your glasses while wearing the gloves, or you have an itch on your face, like I seem to have constantly, you could, whatever's on the glove could be on your face. So that's why they're emphasizing so much about washing your hands. And there's been a lot of conflicting stories of what's the safest way to go, and a lot of people are talking about hand sanitizer. It's so important. And I read another story yesterday that said washing your hands is more effective than hand sanitizer, and to actually get a bar of soap and spend 2 minutes washing your hands and your forearms. So, you're going to do what you feel comfortable with, but the more you can wash your hands, the better. Maybe grab a towel and scratch your face so you can just get the itches out of the way, so you can quit touching your face, your nose, that kind of thing. But, I hope you guys are going to stay safe. I hope none of you end up coming on this live stream saying I got super sick and I barely survived or something horrible like that. Hoping the best for all of you guys. The grocery stores have been considered a essential business, and so they are staying open. And grocery employees are being told you must continue to work because everyone needs food. So this person here says, I wish I was working from home. I'm in the grocery stores fixing equipment while people are going crazy in there. It is what it is. I have to keep the community running. And yes, we want to make sure that our appliances are running. Think about, so a lot of people bought a lot of food, a lot of toilet paper, and then they brought it all home. But if there's a power outage, all that food you bought could spoil. So there's a concern, that something else could go wrong. I mean, Murphy is looking for anything to go wrong. I'm, of course, hoping for the best. I don't even know what the future holds. I don't know if this 2, 3, 4 week thing is going to be good enough for the U.S. I realize, Italy already has been suffering. China had lots of deaths, and other countries are seeing it, and it's exponential. It just over time grows. But at the same time, we want to, be as cautious as we can and astute, that we are super hyper aware of our environment and what we're doing at all times, and our family members are doing, to avoid putting others at risk. Let's see. Okay, so I talked about the grocery stores and the employees. Also, the trucking industry is still going. They're still delivering product. And that means that if food shelves were empty, they will be replenished with more. So it's almost like you're going to have to go out and forage for food a few times to get the things you really want or need versus you went once and it was pointless because they are restocking. I've heard stories repeatedly that certain businesses are opening an hour early for elderly folk first because they don't move as quickly. So they have a chance to get food they need and possibly medicine and then get back out and then it's open to the general public. And I thought that was a nice gesture. I hope it's true, and I hope it's making a difference for those individuals. Like I said, I got quite a few things. I also got comfort foods. I bought ice cream, and I don't know, just it wasn't all, and like people are like, well, you got to have a lot of pasta, and I was like, well, there was none, so I didn't get any. All the tuna was gone, but I had canned tuna here, so I'm okay for a little while. And I'm hoping like in a week or so I can go get some more things. But I'm pretty much staying inside my house at all times. And I hope that many of you are doing the same. So, I wanted to show you something that I mentioned on my Instagram. So I'm going to do that now. Our lighting isn't great, but I'll make a change. That'll fix it, right? I received a package from a 3D printing company about a week ago. He 3D prints those Nero 5 guards that I sell. And he said, hey Mark, I also print other things. So he printed a cage that fits on top of the Vortec pump. And he sent me one to try out. So I did. I stuck it in the Anemone Cube a few days ago. So what I'm doing right now is I'm getting the camera ready. Then, well, you can almost see it now. You got to change the color of the tank. So here's the Anemone Cube. Oh, we got that wonderful camera with a bad wire. And still doing that. I thought we had solved this last time by bending the wire upward to stop it from doing that weird thing that it's doing. So that is the 3D printed cage that fits right over the Vortec, and you just press it on. I don't even know what they cost. I need to find out. But it's really a nice option to keep livestock out of the Vortec pump if you're worried. And I put it in here because I have a lot of anemones, and I wanted to see what would happen if one of the anemones got near it. My own cage that I've had on that tank for probably 18 months is made of acrylic. It's a big square box with a bunch of gaps routed out, and that worked out really well for my tank, making anything could crawl over it and not get sucked in. This is a little closer to the pump, so I don't know if it's going to be quite as effective, but I'm hoping it'll make a difference. And since we're here and you're looking at my tank and I did not clean the glass, I will fix that right quick. And then we will be getting into our next topic. So let's do this. Tanks always look better when the glass has been scraped clean. And I know a lot of you guys are great about it, but sometimes we get a little lazy and we don't get around to it. And this week I just haven't had the time to touch my tank. I've been working on all these little side projects on my tank because I felt like it was important to do those things, but the glass was getting neglected. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to clean, which is why I'm using this razor blade attachment. because I know it'll scrape off all the stuff that a regular cleaning magnet cannot remove. I've been using this scraper for a long, long time, and I really love it. I know others like the flipper cleaning magnet, and I just continue to use this because I'm used to it. Oh, also, I haven't shared with you guys a video yet of the new XHO lights that are over this tank. So I can give you a cursory look, but you'll get a nice video of it very, very soon. Maybe even later today. We'll see. So I'm backing up so you can see. And you can see right there are the XHO strips that are hugging my Radion fixture. It's got a metal bracket that spans it. I'm still using the same hanging kit. And it's nice and clean. And it's working out really well for the tank being super pretty. And what I'm doing is I'm running the XHOs early in the morning before the Radion comes on. Then the Radion comes on, and then it turns off, and then the XHOs turn off about an hour later. So there's the tank right now. So now you've seen the 3D printed cover, and you should let me know if you find that interesting, if you something you want to try out on your tank as well. Derek had placed an order. He's in Hawaii, so he was worried about receiving something that may or may not be leaking. He had heard that some of the Versa pumps were leaking, so he was worried. And he says, I got the Versa and the filter socks yesterday. I installed it, and no leaks. Mahalo. So yes, that is great news. I'm really glad to hear that. Coral Lover says that my Versa pump is sucking in air from time to time, and I don't understand why. Possibly you need to remove the tubing that is going into the Versa, not the one going out. And you want to cut off the end so it's nice and square and clean and push it back in and see if that was the problem. It just wasn't a perfect piece of tubing. That's got to be dead on. Ray says, can you dip soft coral in fresh RODI water only and then place it in the tank? Well, I guess the question is, why would you want to do that? What is your purpose? Why not use any of the coral dips that are recommended? I have not dipped any corals in freshwater ever. Rob H says, are the power bars that you use to toggle your equipment on and off available for purchase anywhere? Greetings from New York. The power bars that you use to toggle your equipment. Oh, you mean the the American DJ switches? You can get those at Guitar Center. You can get them on Amazon. They are somewhere around 30 bucks for 8 switches. The entire power strip has 8 outlets on the back and 8 switches on the front, which is why I like it so much, because I can plug things in. I use a label maker to say what each switch is, and then if I need to turn something off rapidly, like the calcium reactor or the pump of my protein skimmer, I can just hit the skimmer button and remove the collection cup, clean the cup, put it back on top, hit the button, and skimmer's right back on. And so I've been using those things for a super long time, more than a decade. I really like those things, and I've used them to run metal halides. I've used them to run heaters. They have a maximum power consumption of 15 amps, so it is possible to overload the power strip because there's 8 outlets and make the little reset button trip. So you might want to go ahead and open it up from time to time and make sure everything within looks okay. If for some reason you were to have some kind of a small wire smolder in there, could lead to a fire. And I opened up all of mine when I was setting up this tank, and because I had them for a while, and I said, let's make sure they're good. So I opened up the screws on there and popped the lid off, and everything looked good except for one wire. One wire looked really cooked, and that was one that was being used for a 400 watt metal halide ballast. So with that ballast pulling so much juice, it was a logical thing to see that the wire could not hold up long term. I replaced that piece of wire, crimped everything, put the cover back on, and I'm still using that power strip to this day. So you can, yeah, they're great. And like I said, I got mine at Guitar Center. Kevin Jones says, how often do you maintain your continuous duty peristaltic pump? What I was doing with the Kimor was I was replacing the tubing that goes around the rollers every 2 months, maybe every 3, I don't know, something like that. I bought a whole bunch of those spare tubes, so I'd have them ready, so I would never sit there and not have one. So if any of you guys need one, I've got a few. And the rest of it, you don't really do anything. Wipe it off, keep it clean, but there's nothing else that's going on. You know, what else can go wrong? Vivid says an interesting point. He said, it's going to be so hot here in Phoenix for MACNA in August that COVID-19 probably won't survive the heat. And that is something we've heard, that this virus can't survive the heat. So the fact that it's hitting during winter, spring, you know, the weather's not that warm yet, hopefully that has an impact. Coral Lover says, before I had the Trident method dosing and stopped it. Oh, you used the Trident to control your dosing. Now I only have the calcium reactor. Do I have to dose anything else? Well, you might need to dose magnesium. The calcium reactor is calcium and alkalinity. Oh, a lot of you guys are answering questions about what you're doing. So let's share some of those. Man, what is in my throat? I feel like I should go to the doctor. So Bahama says, Bahama Llama says, I'm going to do some cord wrangling on the tanks. Finally. Hope everyone is staying safe. And Neil says, I'm working on the RODI storage station this weekend. Let's see. John Ashley says, do you see any increase in cyano since starting carbon dosing with Nopox? I did see some traces of it, and it never got out of control in my tank. Let's see. Someone says, small crowd for everyone being stuck at home. And I was looking, we have 294 people on here right now. I guess they're all over on Tidal Gardens. He's probably doing a coral selling show right now. And then Matt said, I had a major deal on a $500 deal for a Red Sea Reefer 525 XL, but I'm in doubt if I should leave the house to pick it up, and also I might need the money for later. That's another concern that many people have had. They wanted to know if they had to, if they could avoid making a car payment or pay their rent or pay a credit card this month to have a little extra cash on hand in case things get even worse. And my son called, I think it was Honda, and he said, you know, I'd like to defer my payment for this month just so I can keep cash on hand in case we need money for medicine. And they immediately approved it. They actually said anyone that calls in is getting approved for this month. And so I went to my bank account just to see where I was at, and it was that day that Toyota took my truck payment. And I was like, never mind, you got paid. It's good enough. Oops. But it would have been nice to not have to make a car payment this month and hold it off until the end of the loan. Let's see. Trevor says, do I give up on my bubble tip anemone taking over my 120-liter cube, or should I try and control them? I'm in two minds. I guess can't make up his mind. You can't control an anemone. They do what they want to do. That's why I gave them their own tank to do whatever they want. And if they climb on the glass, I use a scraper and knock them back down, and they go find another spot to be. And it's interesting, when I added the Reef Bright lights here, I started watching, you know, even more closely than I usually do. And I noticed that a lot of the anemones that were in the middle of the tank moved back. So I guess they were trying to get away from some of the light. I also have been looking closely at the tentacles to see if maybe they'll bubble up because there's more light. And there's some hints of bubbles, but will it ever be just like a billion beautiful tight bubbles? No, I can't seem to do that. It's really weird. Let's see. Sleeping Giant from Northern Canada says, I really appreciate your show. It has given me tons of insight and helpful hints. I've been into the saltwater aquariums for 12 years. That's awesome. Well, good job. And Nick, you are late, but that's okay. Usually I'm late too. Let me put that message back up from Sleeping Giant. That was one I meant to click. See, I had something else I want to tell you guys. Oh, yeah, so I had something to show you guys. You guys know I installed the algae turf scrubber a week ago. So last night, I thought, let's take a look and see if anything is happening. Which, we're also impatient. We want things to happen instantly. So, I'm going to get this ready first so that way it looks nice on your screen. Here we go. So that is the turf scrubber drawer that I pulled out. And you can see the screen is essentially white. But if you look closely along the top, there's little hints of algae. So I guess it's going to start to grow. And a couple more weeks, maybe I'll have a whole bunch on there. That'd be really neat. And then finally, here is the filter sock underneath that has been under there for a full week. The whole point of the sock under the turf scrubber was if it were to drop any algae, it would catch it in the sock. Well, what's been going through that sock is essentially tank water that's being, it's flooding across that screen, and then it trickles out that pipe in the middle. The one on the right is the emergency pipe, and nothing comes out of it. And that water has been going through this sock for the last week, and it's disgusting. So I changed the sock out last night. This is apparently something I'll have to, keep up with from time to time. So I wanted to show you that. That is some progress. We are starting to see some algae growing on the turf scrubber. So when that thing is rocking and rolling, we'll see what happens to the refugium. We'll see what happens to the nitrates. It should be very interesting to see what is to come in the coming days. Or weeks, months. Really, everything takes a while to happen in this hobby. My forehead is itching. I swear, I must touch my face 2,000 times a day. Let's see. Frags and Fish says, how do I get rid of microbubbles? We need to find out where they're coming from, first of all. So the best thing you can do is, if you have a tank with a sump, go to where the return pump is at. That's the return zone. And take a flashlight and shine it down in there. And if that water has no bubbles in it whatsoever, then the problem or the microbubbles are coming from either the plumbing going up from the return pump, or it's actually happening from the plumbing as it goes back into the tank. So it could be a lock line fitting that doesn't have Teflon tape on the threads when it's screwed into the PVC. It could be the knuckles of the lock line are bleeding in air, which is blowing out these bubbles. But if you have bubbles in the return zone, the problem is before the return zone, which means you need to stop the microbubbles from getting to the return zone. So I hope that helps you figure that out, but that's how you do it. You want to, if there's none in the return zone, then it's something to do with plumbing. The other thing it could be possibly is you're starving the return pump to where it's cavitating. And what that means is the water can't get into the pump fast enough as the impeller is spinning, and so it's chopping out the water and creating bubbles. So there's a possibility of that as well. Let's see something here. I was curious if I could take a look at something here on YouTube really fast, but I don't know. All right, well, let that load. This week on Club Miller's Reef, someone was memeing me from last week's stream because they screenshot me during a moment when I didn't look my best. So I need to ask all of you, never ever pause me ever again. So funny. Keith Singer says, I used F-Aptasia and accidentally had some drop on a rock flower anemone and immediately brushed it off, but it still left a nasty burn. It's been 3 days and a quarter of it has turned white and stays folded up. Yeah, I believe it. That stuff cannot touch anything but what you want to actually get rid of. You got to be super careful with it. So I know that initially it was made to destroy Aptasia. And then later on, they said, hey, it works for Mahanos too. And then people are like, oh, I can use it for anything. It'll kill anything. So keep that in mind that you don't want F-Aptasia to land on things you care about. You might have to put something on top of the thing beneath it. Like, I don't know, if you were to take, for example, a milk jug and cut out a shield and lay it on top of a coral, that way if you're killing an Aptasia above and it drizzles, it lands on the plastic of the milk jug, and you could carefully get that out of the tank. That might be one way, kind of like tarping off your furniture when you're going to paint the room. Same principle. But hopefully that rock anemone, the rest of it will heal or it will continue to do well, and that section that got burned can recover. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a goner. It just sounds like a part of it got nicked. Sizzle Reef says, I have a 20-gallon tank with a refugium. No, for a refugium, and a 40-gallon tank as the sump that has a single return. Should I try to run different percentages of water through the refugium and at a different flow rate? Since you have the separate vessels, you definitely can. I like to send 75% of the water into your sump and 25% into the refugium. So the water moving through the refugium moves through a little slower than it does through the skimmer section. And then I assume the refugium is draining down into the return zone of the 40-gallon breeder and sending it back up to the tank. That would be my recommendation. Frags and Fish says, how does he put the question on the screen? When you guys type something in the chat box, I see it, and my streaming software allows me to add it to the broadcast. And then when I'm done, I can remove it from the broadcast. It's pretty nice. Gordy, thank you very much for the super chat. RC Jedi says, for RODI, do I have to change all the stages of media filters at once, or can I change stages separately? For example, change the sediment filter only. You absolutely can do it as needed based on what is being consumed. And some people are forced to constantly change the sediment filter because it gets so badly clogged on a regular basis. There's just so much sediment in their water, it turns brown, and they replace that one every month. And their carbon and, the carbon blocks might last 6 months. The DI might last 4 months. The membrane could last 2 or 3 years. So you see, everything has a time of when it needs to be used up. So yes, you can definitely do it at different times. Let's see. The fish guy says, wait, my vortex slowed down at night. Could that do something? It can. When you're trying to rule out something that's not working well in your tank, it's best to focus on one thing and one thing only for a few weeks. So in your case, your corals aren't growing. So if we could maybe stabilize the tank, where you're not adding anything new, you're not taking out anything, you're not changing doses, you're not adjusting lighting, just literally, if you're only going to focus on the Vortec pumps, maybe set them to a certain percentage, whatever you like during the daytime. Like, let's say you keep it at 68%. Then just run it 68% around the clock. Don't even lower it down at night. Just don't. And see how the tank does for the next few weeks. Remember, you're not going to see overnight changes. Now, if you see a disaster happening, immediately cease what you changed. Like if you're like, well, I keep it at 68% because you told me to, and now the tissue blew off the skeleton, well, then that was a bad number. I'm just saying that whatever the number is you use during the daytime, maybe continue it at night, let that be completely stable, and find out if that is possibly a help or didn't change anything whatsoever. If it didn't change anything, you could continue to leave it like that, or you can let it slow down at night because it didn't make any difference whatsoever. It could be that when you're dosing your tank with something, that the chemical, as it hits the water, lands right on those corals, and it's irritating them to where they just cannot thrive like you'd want them to. It's just something to, you're going to have to basically do a process of elimination to discover what is going on. Let's see. Aw. Brian says, I just donated to the Great Barrier Reef Project. That's awesome. And yes, we definitely want to thank our awesome moderators for helping keep our chat friendly. Thanks, guys. Russ, you are one of the lucky ones. Actually, a lot of you were. I had ordered in a pallet of RODI parts to make a bunch of systems. And normally that will take care of me for many months. And I ordered them, I don't know, weeks ago, and it took forever to get to me. Finally got here. I received them on Tuesday. And by the following Monday, I had to place an order for another pallet of parts because so many people have bought an RODI system. It was insane. When I called him up, said, hey, I need another pallet. He goes, you just got one. I was like, I know. I need to pay for it and order another one. And so I've got another pallet coming in next week. And I built like 18 units so far this week, which is very unusual. And, I'm happy you guys are trusting the systems I sell. I appreciate it. So, these systems, I've been selling them probably since 2003, 2004. They are available on my website. There's an entire section dedicated to RODI filters and parts. Of course, there's a 1-year warranty with them. There are upgrade kits to make it even better. And I try to always stock everything so that there's plenty of everything on hand so you don't have to wait too long. We had Quarantinesgiving the other day. We needed the freezer space, so we cooked the turkey. Awesome, that's cool. Let's see. Yvonne says, I just went through a bad ick battle in my reef tank and I lost all of my fish but the Nassau. How long should I keep my tank fishless before restocking? I've read so many different time frames. 12 weeks is the general rule for running a tank fallow. Fallow means fishless. So if you can have no fish in there at all and your Nassau is somewhere safe for the time being, I would go a full 12 weeks. And then after 12 weeks, you can reintroduce the Nassau in, and any new fish should go through quarantine to avoid them reinfecting your tank all over again. Skinner works in fire protection, and so he was curious if anyone else is still working. Aftershock says he likes this spot where I'm standing. Yeah, it's okay. I just wish everything in the background was crystal clear and sharp, and then that's just not how the webcam works. I shared a really pretty picture of the end of my tank the other day. I'll show it to you guys really quick. And when I did that, people were like, man, I wish your tank looked like that in the stream. So here is a good view of the end of the tank right now. Turn this off. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. So you guys can see Spock right there. You can see a chalice, a bunch of acans in the lower right corner, all the Duncans in the left corner. There's a toadstool leather back here. This Vortec could use one of those cool cage covers, I think. I need to get one. Even though I've never had anything lost on it, but still, why not? This big brown one, a lot of people always ask me, what is that? That's the Tracy Morgan Gorgonian. And I got it from the Long Island Aquarium, I don't know, 7 years ago. And there is my cleaner wrasse. There is one of the yellow tangs in the reflection and the purple tang. And there's a skunk clownfish posing beautifully. So that is my view every single day. Really enjoy it. All right. Russ says, why don't you leave the RO system when filling the bladder constantly? My family uses a lot of ice and drinking water. I'd have to fill it up daily. That would be a pain in the butt. The problem with leaving it hooked up constantly is that your RODI system will cycle on and off so frequently, and it'll send TDS creep into your bladder tank. So that first minute that the unit turns on, you're going to put 100, 150 TDS into the bladder tank, which then feeds your spigot and your ice maker. And so instead, what you do is you want to turn it on, wait 90 seconds, close that valve, let the water go to the bladder tank, and fill it up. And, I live here alone, but I've had an RODI system since 2002, and I had my son here, and I had a roommate here as well, and we made it work. I just had to refill it a couple times a week. So you may discover you need to do it every other day. You don't have to do it every single day, but it just depends. Maybe you do. But it's that first minute every time it turns on that's going to be detrimental in the long run for everything, which is why I don't recommend that. And so that's why I suggest doing what I recommend. If you absolutely must have an RO system feeding a bladder tank constantly because it can't keep up, you might as well get a Home Depot one that you can stick under the sink and let that thing just be the feed. But again, it's still the same thing. It's going, the first minute of TDS coming off the membrane is going to flush into the system. And I would avoid that. I don't recommend it. George says, I already ate all the snacks. There's no snacks left. I ate them already. I know I bought this one bag of Gordettos, and I was like, it's a little bag, and it's not going to last long. And I only have a little bit left. I was like, dang it, I should have bought like 10 of those just because it's delicious. And I get you. I totally do. I'm actually thinking I want to bake some cookies. I want to make brownies. I want to make some desserts. And I probably will. I just made all that chicken last night, but in a couple days I'm going to have a cheese fondue. I bought the sourdough bread already. I have the cheese fondue mix. I have a fondue pot, and I'm going to enjoy that all by myself, and I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem not sharing my food. I had a friend many years ago that says, Mark, you are such an only child. He's 100% right. I totally am. How many of you guys are only children? I want to hear others that think like me. I'm so sick of being good to everyone. I want some support. DL says, do you feed torches? Some people say yes. What do you do? I don't have any torches. But if I did, like any LPS coral, it would get broadcast fed. I'm not good enough about target feeding corals. I haven't in a long time. So what I would say is that you could use something like Benereef, which this stuff here is great. I sell it on my site in 3 different sizes. This is the biggest one, so it's the most expensive. It lasts the longest. This is the powder that you mix with your tank water for 5 minutes, and then you pour it in your tank, or you can turn off the flow and you can put it in syringes and you can squirt it at specific corals and target feed them this stuff. And you can do it 2-3 times a week. It doesn't increase nitrate or phosphate, and it also does not create cyano, which is one of the reasons why I so love it. I tend to use it once a week because I always forget to use it. And then someone will post something like, oh yeah, let me do that right now. And I even tell my watch, set a timer for 5 minutes so I don't forget, because otherwise it'll just sit on the counter and hours later I'm like, oh, I totally forgot to pour that in my tank. So it's just not my routine. I'm just not like, if I used it like every other day, I'd probably be really good at it. But I tend to be more like I forget about it until someone posts and I'm like, oh yeah. So that is one way to feed your corals in the tank, either through the food moving through the entire tank, or individually directing the food at specific corals in the tank. But that's a nice choice. And there's other foods you can use as well. This is great. Cue Balls Reef says, I'm using this time to teach my son about home economics, cooking dinner, how to maintain a car, biology, my reef, finance, and taking the dog for a walk, which is gym class. And that is a great idea. And I know a lot of people are struggling. What am I going to do with my kid? They're not in school. I've got to go back to work. But since you're not going to work, you're at home. And yes, you could burn the days away watching Netflix, being on Xbox or PlayStation or other device. But knowing how things work, cleaning things really well, making things nice for everyone in the household, all good ideas. Learning how to cook, learning how to fix things in the house that maybe you have this stuff on hand that you just never go around doing. I remember spending a lot of time with my son doing things, building things. And the one thing I always wanted to do, and we saw it on Home Improvement, it showed Tim the Toolman was always in his garage, and he and his son, or sons, were building a car in the garage. It was a rusty bucket, and after, whatever, a whole season or a few seasons, there was this beautiful car that came out of the garage. And that was the one thing we never did. I always thought would have been really cool to do, was to work on a car together from the ground up. We worked on our cars together. There was many times where he came over, hey, can I borrow your tools? Can I use your jack? Can I do this? Can you help me with this part? And we did a lot of that. And he also helped me on my car when I was trying to do things. But a lot of times it ends up, hand me this, hand me that, and you're just under there doing it by yourself. But showing your your kids very specific things, like how to change the tire on your car, how to fix an electrical outlet in the wall, how to turn circuit breakers on and off, knowing how things actually work is something they don't learn in school. And so if we can help them benefit with real life things we do at home that we do all the time, it really is a good thing for them. They may resent it, they may not like it, but it's going to come in handy when they move out and they have to do all these things. They're like, oh yeah, my dad showed me how to do this, or my mom showed me how to do this. Sleeping Giant says, if my bubble tip anemone is reaching out but not moving from the spot it made home, should I worry? I've been spot feeding it once a day. No, you shouldn't have to worry. I mean, they're going to stretch out and do their thing, but it may choose to walk at some time. So that's why it's so important to cover all of your intakes of power heads inside the tank that the anemone is in, so it won't be damaged. Because if it gets chopped up by the impeller of the pump, the nematocysts that go into the water can actually kill a lot of fish. So it's very important that it cannot get sucked into a pump. Oh, I wanted to also mention, like you guys, we're all worried about paying the bills. And I called up my acrylic supplier on Friday. I said, are you guys going to be open next week? And he says, yes. I said, can I get a shipment on Monday? And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay. So I placed a big order for a lot of acrylic, thinking that if things get really dire, that I can still cut acrylic and build things for you guys in case I run out of regular in-store inventory of things like... I have a whole bunch of fish food in store in stock in my store right now. I even have foods on there that I need to add. Like, for example, I have a lot of the Cobalt foods, and they have these huge jars that are like full of flake food, which will last you like a whole year or more. I need to add those to the website. They aren't on there yet. So if one of you is looking for like a ginormous jar of flake food, let me know, because it's a really good, rich food. And I believe that flake food that they make has probiotics in it too. David Turner says, are you guys in the U.S. in lockdown? California is right. Los Angeles is right now. That's 40 million people, and they locked it down as of yesterday. There's word that they may do it to New York City as well. So there is some growing concerns that our freedoms are going to be limited more and more and more. Dustin says, why do my SPS seem to die when they get about half the size of a baseball? My alkalinity is 7. I would assume, because you only gave me one thing, that what may be happening is you're having some kind of a shift in your tank. And so everything's really good, and you probably aren't messing with it, and the coral grows, and then you neglected something, and the water kind of collapses, and you fix it. But by then the SPS, which they are very demanding corals, they want your SPS has the moniker stability promotes success. So the more stable your water is, if your water is the exact same all the time, no crazy hot spike, doesn't cool off too much, alkaline doesn't drop, alkaline doesn't spike, magnesium stays around the same number, phosphate and nitrate are detectable but not unlimited, then usually the corals will adapt and continue to thrive. But if every time you see it get to a certain size and it just implodes, I'm thinking something is changing. It could even be something as, I just did a water change yesterday, and when you change the water wasn't the right temperature, or something didn't match in the water. I always recommend that your alkaline, your pH, but that's alkalinity. pH, temperature, and salinity be exactly the same. If you can get those three to match, you should be able to change water with no problem. But if you put in water with like really high alkalinity or really low, or the water in the jug is so cold it puts a shock, it could be one of the reasons why you're losing these SPS corals. But that's just pure guesswork based on the limited information you gave me. Tim says, how is the Tammany tang doing? Are you talking about my whitetail tang? My bristle-tooth tang? It's doing well. It just has holes around its head. He says, I know you aren't a fan of Miracle Mud, but many people swear it reverses HLLE. Have you considered putting a Tupperware container with a few pounds of it in the sump? I hadn't. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. So thanks for the tip. That's good. Let's see. I'm only 36 minutes behind the conversation. That's amazing. So he says that the Connecticut farmers frag market was up and was mobbed with people on March 6th. He said, wall-to-wall people, vendors shoulder to shoulder, everyone shaking hands. Wow, I didn't know about that one. But then I saw videos of a bunch of people in Florida enjoying spring break. A lot of teenagers and young, underage drinkers. I guarantee you there's a ton of those. Because spring break, it's famous. Everyone wants to do like they see in the movies. But they were interviewing, it was on the news, aren't you worried about coronavirus? And they're like, if I get it, I get it. I'm not going to get it. It's going to be fine. I planned this months ago. I'm not going to miss it. And it was like they just didn't even remotely care. And I was shocked. I mean, I get it. I was young once. I did some nutty stuff myself. But man, I would not mess around with this one. Bridget says, how would you go about adding sand to an existing reef tank? I have a 75-gallon tank with 1 inch of sand. Well, you're going to... I would recommend that you only add a ½ inch of sand to the tank per week, so like per session. So if you said, hey, today I'm going to do it, you can stop the flow in the tank. You can get your bag of sand that you got at the fish store, wipe it off really clean on both sides, so the plastic has nothing on it. And then you can cut open the top and you can fold over the flap and lower it into the tank and lift the bag up and pour the sand out and kind of move the bag back and forth. If there's any corals on the sand, obviously you want to move them out of the way first so you can get this all nice and level and then rearrange the things back on the sand the way you're used to it. But if you put a whole bunch of sand on top of the existing sand bed, it can kill the sand bed underneath because it smothers it. You can't get any oxygen. So you want to make sure that you're only adding a ½ inch so that all the stuff in the sand beneath can migrate up into the new sand. So maybe you only put in half the bag and remove the bag from the tank, and then a week from now do it again. That would be how I would do it. That's awesome. A lot of you are saying that it's true that they are doing that 1 hour early for the seniors to go shopping. I'm glad to hear that's actually happening. It's not just a feel-good wish story. Maria says, do you need to do a water change if you scrape your tank? No. If you're scraping your tank of algae on the glass, a lot of times you'll notice your fish are going to gobble it up. They're going to eat it. It's a type of food. I mean, basically, it's sort of like solid phytoplankton. And if you have coralline on the glass, which is a hard substance that's calcium-based that might be purple, might be pink, might be red, it might be kind of whitish. As you scrape it off, you'll actually break up the coralline into little bits of seeds that blow all over the tank and land elsewhere, and it can help grow the coralline elsewhere in the tank. But you do not need to do a water change because you're cleaning the glass. That's not necessary whatsoever. Hey, Jace, thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, so I want to stop answering questions right here. I apologize if you're still waiting. But I want to talk about what we can do with our tanks now while we're staying at home, because you may be limited by what you have on hand. But now is the perfect time to work on those projects that you've been putting off on your aquarium. You know, as you guys have probably been noticing over the last couple of weeks, I've gotten a ton of projects done around my tanks. The next tank that needs, like the full attention is my frag system, which I've mentioned forever, and it's finally, I'm at the point where I can tackle it. I fixed the saltwater mixing station. It's completely done. It's all plumbed in. It's got salt water in it. I created a support post so that the plumbing won't shake, because I was a little nervous about that spot because I have a hose and I'm yanking on it, and I didn't want to cause a problem there. I got the turf scrubber installed. I did some tank cleaning. I did some skimmer cleaning. I've done water tests. I've done some electrical stuff. I installed a new 832 power brick under my stand for me to plug in everything. And more. It's an ongoing thing. I mean, there's so many projects I've been just knocking out one after another. And you should be doing the exact same thing. You should really clean your tanks. And this is the time. Spring cleaning. So clean the glass, get down into these corners and clean them really well. Take a spatula and run a scraper through there like I'm going to do, so that this isn't black and it can look clean and sandy again. You can do that. That's not going to hurt your reef to do that. You want to wipe down the top rim of your tank. You want to wipe down, clean your sump, siphon out or vacuum out the detritus that's in the bottom. Change RO filters, clean skimmer and return pumps, because they've been sitting there running for 3 years and you've never touched them once. This is your chance. You've got some downtime, and you could spend an hour a day on your tank making it better. And after 7 hours or 1 week, you'll have a whole bunch of things accomplished in your tank, and you'll feel a lot better about the reef, and you'll probably start getting even more compliments from the family members that it's looking better and better. So this is the time. You know, so many times you're like, oh, I have to work, and now I got to go do this, and my wife asks me to do that, and you have all these errands to do. Not allowed to do anything. So you can really work on your system. And if you need certain things, I might sell it at my shop. If I don't sell it, you know, you can get it from another company, or you could order things on Amazon. Maybe you want to order citric acid for cleaning parts because you don't want to use vinegar. Maybe you need a new backup return pump. Now's the perfect time to buy one and have it sitting on the shelf for if and when you need one, so you can kind of do your emergency preparedness for emergencies. I know that was a little redundant, but we want to always try to think ahead of what we need so that we can make sure everything's running in tip-top shape so that these animals can stay healthy and thrive. So we definitely want to do that. Food-wise, if you have fish food just like you do human food, you probably have frozen, and then you have other food, flake food and pellet food. You may want to use the frozen for now. You might want to mix it up each day. It's your choice. But when you run out of frozen and you're stuck with only pellet and flake because that's all you have, that's okay. There's a lot of people out there with tanks that just use flake food, and that's all they ever use. And they seem to have quite pretty fish. So don't sit there and think, oh no, I have no frozen food. I've heard that several fish stores across the nation are doing curbside service to where you can call ahead and say, I want to get this, this, and this, and then they will bring it to your car, you know, right up to the curb and handle your transaction. And I thought that's pretty cool. I mean, it's again, the fish store doesn't want to go out of business. They want to keep going, and they do need support. And if you can afford a few bucks to buy some things from them, but not risk going in and polluting the store with the cooties, then we want to do that. So that is another nice option that's available. Other than that, now is the perfect time to inspect everything you own. So like I was talking about cleaning pumps, that means opening them up and looking at the magnet, make sure the magnet hasn't split open. If you have a cleaning magnet, you want to take it and you want to look at the back side, make sure the felt is in good shape, or replace the felt. The inside part, you want to make sure it's not cracked open. If you have a frag rack, you want to make sure those magnets are still intact and good. If you're using a feeding clip like I do over here, you want to make sure it hasn't rusted inside your system. I mean, these are the times to look for anything that could be wrong because you got some free time. And I'm not trying to give you busy work. I'm trying to remind you of all those little things you've been like, oh yeah. If you've never secured your lights and they're just balanced on your tank, maybe now's the time to get a hanging kit and get them hanging from the ceiling. And if you can't afford much, you can do it inexpensively. I mean, I've seen people make stuff out of 2x4s. I've hung lights over my tank with fishing line instead of the steel cable. I buy the 50-pound test because these lights are 5 pounds. So this right here It's an actual Ecotech lighting kit that I installed in the ceiling 8-9 years ago. And it's when I switched out the lights on there, I continue to use the same cable system. But like my Radions over the frag tank, the XHO over the Fusion, they're all using the 50-pound fishing line, which you get a big spool for a few bucks. And I was able to tie everything at the exact right height with a knot. And I knotted several times so they can't just suddenly pop loose. And that's worked out really well for me. I just want you to kind of like, now's your chance to kind of really enjoy your hobby even more so because you're at home with your tank. So the more you clean it up and make it look better, the more you're going to enjoy it. So during the actual work of working on the tank's no fun. I get it. It's like, oh, what a beating. But then, you look at the tank when you're done, you're like, oh, it's cloudy. And you're like, you go wash your hands and you're disgusted. But then, 4 or 5 hours from now, you look at it and the water's nice and clear. Things are a lot cleaner. You removed a lot of dead skeletons. You removed empty shells. You rearranged the rock a little bit. You planted a few frags finally on the rockwork where they belong with some putty and glue. And then the next day, your tank's going to look a lot better. And you can really enjoy it. So, why not? When you first started this hobby, when you first got the tank, everything was brand pristine new. You were super excited. And it looked fantastic. And then over time, it went through all the uglies, and you got kind of mad at your tank because you don't like looking at uglies. You don't like looking at diatoms or cyano or green hair algae or worse, dinoflagellates. You don't like having to test water all the time. It's such a struggle. You don't like that fish are getting diseases. There's a lot of things not to like. But when you get past all those hurdles and overcome them, you get to feel good about yourself because you overcame it yourself. You did it. And then additionally, you get to see the tank settle in. And like I did a video a few weeks ago about tank maturity, as the tank becomes more mature and more stable and more situated, it's actually less effort for you. So now, like my tank's 6.5 years old. 6.5 years of getting dirty. So me going through there every couple of months and really cleaning every single thing I can reach kind of revives it back to its initial state of where it was 6.5 years ago. And when people come over and they look at my tank, they're like, oh, your tank looks so great. And I appreciate that, but of course I know all the flaws. I know the things I don't like or the things that bother me or the things I haven't done yet. So now's our chance to do those things. And so I do encourage you to do that and use your time for something. And you could even make it kind of a family thing. You can have the kids help you with some of it. They can help make sure the hose does not come out of the bucket during the water change. Their job is hold that hose there and nothing else. Pay attention. Tell me when it's full. It's easy. Or can you go get me a new filter sock? I keep them in this bin in the garage, and they'll go get that. And it's a little bit of teamwork, a little bit of inspiration, and you can even teach them a few things while they're looking at the tank. That's Neptasia. There's nothing wrong with that. I remember years ago, my son came in with his friends, and they're looking at the tank, and I'm just, I'm aware that he's in the room with his friends, but I'm not, like staring at them. And I hear him say, that's Neptasia, and that's this. I'm like, wow, he knew what Neptasia was. And, kids absorb a lot of information. And so teaching them stuff and explaining how things work, it's great. And we watch nature shows to learn, and, we go to public aquariums to learn. We go to museums to learn from things that have, from the skeletons. So we are always learning, and here's your chance while you're at home to kind of learn some stuff. So I encourage you to do all that and, keep things fun. Doesn't have to just be everyone buried in their phones all day. Let's see. Frags and Fish says, do I need an air stone in my saltwater tank? No. No, usually we don't use air stones in our aquariums. There's very few occasions when you do see aquariums, saltwater tanks or saltwater reefs with an air stone. The one time when you definitely want it is if you're trying to treat the tank for cyanobacteria, and that is that's a medication that we put in the tank to eliminate that bacteria. And when we do that, you have to add an air stone for oxygenation. It's very important. But the rest of the time, no. When you're trying to grow something like phytoplankton, that doesn't even use an air stone. It uses a tube from an air pump that does a bubble, 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 and it's just kind of very, very soft. It's not even a boil because it's just barely, it's bubbling. It's just to create a little bit of circulation in the phytoplankton. Again, that's not in the aquarium. If you were trying to drive off CO2 from water you're collecting from a well, that needs an air stone. But again, that's not your aquarium. That's in a barrel in the workshop or whatever. So no, don't need it. Michael Haynes says, what is the recommendation for the depth of a frag tank? Okay, so normally depth means front to back, and you might mean height. So I'll address both after I take this sip of cold coffee. If you have more space front to back, you can have more frags in there. And the height, usually 10 inches of water is sufficient for most corals, because you're going to have a frag rack of some kind that's probably 2 inches tall. You put the frag plugs in all the little holes, and then the corals have a few inches to grow, and there's still enough water on top of them so that way they have, you know, some circulation moving across with a Vortec or a Gyre or a Jabo or whatever it is you're using, or Nero 5 pump. So you've got the water moving across, and these corals are within reach to where you can reach in with some tweezers or tongs and remove them, pick off algae. There's still a little bit of room in the frag system for fish to swim around and eat nuisance algae too. So those are kind of my answers there. I don't see the point of having a big, tall frag tank this tall with all your frags way at the bottom. And if you put a frag rack way up high, then why do you have such a tall tank? Other than just more water volume. Just another nanotank says, do not go to the doctor right now, hotspot. Yeah, no, you're right. And my son recently had to call the doctor, and they did a like a FaceTime interview, and he got a prescription called in. It was pretty cool. So he didn't actually go to the doctor's office. He scheduled the appointment. The doctor then called back within X amount of minutes, and he explained the symptoms, and the doctor then made the diagnosis. It was pretty cool. We might see more and more of that. Jess Moses says, I know you have the anemone tank, but do you have any anemones in your main display? Yeah, there's a giant sea bay in there that's 24 inches in diameter. It's been in there for years. It's got a bunch of skunk clownfish in there. And then a couple of these guys snuck into there, and I've not removed them. And one split. So there's a couple way down low in the rockwork down here. And I've been tolerating them. I don't really want them in that tank, and I probably will at some point have to go in there and pluck them off of the rock. But for now, I'm just kind of like, yeah, you made it to there. I'm going to give you a break and let you survive. Let's see. Tim B says, have you given any serious thought to new critters in the refugium now that you have the scrubber? No, it's too soon. I need the scrubber to do its job, and I need to see the refugium dwindle off. And if it does, if and then, that will be when I tackle what's going to happen to the refugium zone next. Rob H says the anemone in his display is a long tentacle. It's actually a sea bay. Sea bay manu, or malu, is the anemone that I have in there. Heteractis malu. Wow, that's cool. Sleeping Giant says he just got a 6-month mortgage deferred payments from the bank in Canada. 6 months, you don't have to pay your house payment. That's amazing. I hadn't heard anything like that. That's incredible. Trevor says, I have a couple of SPS that have stung each other and now have algae growing in them. Can I use hydrogen peroxide on the SPS, and if so, at what ratio? What you want to do, whatever was stung, you want to take bone cutters, these guys right here, and you want to cut off the part of the coral that has algae. Just cut the algae right off. Just snip that little bit of stony away and let the coral grow fresh. If you would like, as an extra preventative method or approach, where you cut off the stony coral, you can apply a little blob of superglue gel over the exposed skeleton so that the tissue of the coral can grow over that. And if you do that, you won't have to deal with nuisance algae infesting into your SPS coral. So snip, glue, ignore. That's pretty much what you got to do. And if the corals are able to touch each other, to sting each other to that degree, you need to create some space, or you might have to actually do some fragging to create a nice safe distance between the two to prevent it happening even further. Sometimes some acros can tolerate others. Sometimes they duke it out. Gary, talk to Andrea because she's the one in charge of it getting his own addresses, and if your name was chosen, it should have gone up. Let's see. Robert says, my calcium reactor is only putting out 15 DKH. The small MaxiJet pump failed and replaced it with a bigger pump. Do you think it's too much water going into the reactor? It's set at 6.5. Yes. Okay, so here's the thing. I have run an entire manifold pump, which is like a huge reflow dart pump, moves like 3,000 gallons an hour, into a manifold with a bunch of valves. And each line went to like biopellets, carbon, something else, and there was a line went to the calcium reactor. And I used 1/4-inch tubing with a needle valve to dial how much flow goes through. So it really doesn't matter what size pump is pushing water into the reactor if you can control the amount of water going into the reactor. You want the flow to go through very slowly, and you want your DKH coming out to between 19 and 35. So if it's coming out at 15, if the water's coming out too quickly, you need to slow the flow. So I would reduce the water going into the reactor more, and then after like a day, measure the DKH and see what the number is. Because once you've got that 19 to 35, your tank's going to maintain alkalinity far better than when it's only 15. 15 is not really high enough. Tim says, why do you think Acropora are the most difficult to care for and to be successful with? Okay, so when you first set up a saltwater tank, the first thing you typically get is some rock and sand and some fish, and you get a mushroom, or you get some zinnia, or you get green star polyps, or you get a feather duster, or you get a corybina shrimp. You know, these are all cool, interesting, weird things, and we put them in and we love them. And then while you're at the fish store and you're buying these things because they were inexpensive and they grow fast and they move in the water, you might have noticed there's this one tank against the wall that looks really amazing, but nothing's moving. That's usually the SPS tank. Those hard corals are just standing there in different colors, different shapes. Some are growing out in a table, some are growing up into the shape of a pear, some look like an apple, some do this weird inverted vase looking thing, and you're just like, man, those are really cool. Like, oh, it's SPS, you're not ready for that. So you're like, oh, okay, well, what do I have to do to be ready? Well, do you check for magnesium? Do you check for phosphate? Do you check for, we started going down the list of test kits you've never bought before. Potassium. And so we learn over time how to make better and better water decisions. And then as that happens, then we start leaning into the more delicate corals, which typically is SPS corals. The Acropora species itself is pretty durable. It's not one of those ones where you buy it and it's going to die during acclimation, or you're going to buy it and it's going to last you a day or two. I mean, they should do well if your water is reef quality. But if you're only checking temperature and salinity and nitrates and ammonia each week, you're not ready for SPS corals. And so in your case, you're saying, why do I think Acropora is so difficult? Because we need to know so much more about the water than someone that has a softy tank that grew a buttload of zoanthids and rickordias and couldn't do anything wrong. That was perfect for them. They had the filtration that was perfect for that. But those corals love dirty water and they can tolerate almost anything. SPS, they want really pristine water. They want high flow. They want strong light. They want stable parameters day in, day out, month after month after month. And even the one acro that went up in smoke in my tank, and I was like, oh. I showed it to Dwayne, my buddy in Seattle that I got the coral from. He goes, yep. And I'm just like, oh, because he lost his as well. And he says, that's what Acropora do. So it's kind of a heartbreaking thing because you're trying to grow these beautiful corals and you spend a lot of time and effort and sometimes money on these corals. And then they just go up in smoke. They just turn bone white. Every bit of the tissue comes off and you have nothing to show for it. And 9 months of growth is now gone. Like that one person said earlier in the stream, I can grow it to half the size of a baseball and then boom, it's dead. What's happening? It can be very frustrating. but it's kind of that thing everyone is aiming for. They're trying to hit that pinnacle of the hobby, is to keep and maintain SPS and do a good job. And you'll notice a lot of the popular tanks oftentimes have softies and LPS corals way more than SPS. I want to clear my throat here. I just want to have a voice. All right, so there we go. There's this one really pretty tank that's on Instagram right now that you might have seen. I'm going to show it with you guys here in a second. I just saw it in my feed. Let me find it really quick. Just saw it this morning. I just have to get past all these Instagram models. Oh, that's beautiful. And this is not an SPS. That is an LPS. Look at that thing. Woo, gorgeous. And it's posted by Polyp Labs. That is a really nice ACAN. All right, keep scrolling. I want to find this tank because I want to show you guys something. And there is some SPS on this tank, but that is not what pops out in your eyes. Oh, where are you? I literally saw this 2 hours ago. See who I'm following, that might help. Nope, not him. Dang it. I hate it when I can't find things I want to show you guys. Oh, that's cool. They got a new feature in here. Not that it helped. Yes, there it is. Yay, I found it. All right, so look at this tank. Look at that beauty. And you can see a lot of LPS, and you can see a lot of softies, like zoanthids, and there is a few SPS in the back. And even way in the back are softies again. That looks like Nephthia back there in the background. There's some acans, there's some scolies, and he's got this whole floating reef going on. And it is such a pretty tank. It's all being supported by a piece of acrylic. It's really, really cool. So Coral Fish Zoa is the name of the channel. And I like following this one. And it's a beautiful tank, but it's not an SPS tank. So my point is that we look at different systems. A lot of times the popular ones are tanks that are filled with seahorses. My tank's a mixed reef. There's LPS, SPS, anemones, chalices, acans. It's a mixture of a lot of things, and there's even things missing that people are like, why don't you have clams? Why don't you have this? And you're right. Why don't I have those things? I'd like to add more things, honestly. It would be great. But yeah, Acropora are challenging and frustrating. So I hope that answered your question, Tim. I did a whole live stream about SPS corals, specifically about Acropora, probably a year ago. It was a good one. Very popular. Glenn Smith says, can you share any live foods which you can grow at home in buckets, which is simple to do for feeding corals and fish? Phytoplankton and baby brine shrimp are the first two that most people like to do, and both are listed on my website with a full article how to do it. And I don't have anything growing here to show you, but those two articles, baby brine shrimp and phytoplankton, are both things you can do in your home. And I used to do. I did it with my 280-gallon tank. I grew both and poured those in my tank all the time. I just didn't do it with a new tank. Jamie says, I started using Red Sea amino acids and didn't realize they needed to be refrigerated after opening. Should I stop using and throw it away, or will it be okay, or is it less effective? Thanks again. You need to smell it. Give it the smell test. If it smells rancid, if it smells rotten, then I would toss it out. You can also contact Red Sea directly and ask them. Maybe ask them on their Instagram or ask them on their Facebook page, because a lot of these companies are staying in contact with their customers through social media. I've seen the Red Sea sponsored ad on Facebook like crazy, where they're squirting some kind of neon green food all over the corals, and those guys are answering questions like within the hour. That'd be a great place to say, hey, I have your amino acids, I forgot to refrigerate, should I have done that? But find out first if it smells horrific. If it smells terrible, it's definitely done. The amino acids I use are called AcroPower, and they don't need to be refrigerated. So that's the best I can say, is I would go to the source and ask them. Kevin Jones says, I saw my clownfish, the male, what looked like convulsions in front of the bigger female. Are my clowns entering adulthood? What the male is doing is a submissive dance. So it gets in front of the female, or the female approaches it, and usually the female is the bigger one. So the smaller one does this twitching thing, and it turns sideways. It doesn't face it and twitch. It turns sideways and twitches really hard, like you said, like convulsions. And it's telling the female, I'm not aggressive, I'm not another girl, and I'd like to be your mate. And that can then allow that one to become a male, and the male and the female can then become a bonded pair. That is a possibility, and we see it happen a lot in our aquariums. The Happy Bone says, what is your opinion on black substrate? I'm starting a new nano tank and would like to use black substrate, but after doing some research, I hear bad things, heavy metals, etc. There's no such thing as black sand. Basically, the black substrate is a metal base. And I'm trying to remember, because I'm working off the top of my head here, and so someone's going to correct me. But I don't think it's volcanic, but it's, number one, it's always going to look dirty. It looks great the first minute you pour it in. It looks fantastic before you add water. Once you add the water, it's going to start to look dirty. And detritus is going to constantly mix on top of it. And it's going to start to have that, it could even get to the point where it's kind of salt and pepper, which isn't that great. The thing about it is that there is chances of metal being in it, yes. And the thing that we don't like about it is that it absorbs all the light. So instead of, because you're probably liking it because you're thinking you can have your coral against that black background. It's sort of like a diamond against velvet, and it looks amazing. That can look really well. It's almost better to have some way to photograph your corals against a black background, like a temporary box. You put in the tank, put the coral in there, let it relax for a little bit, take your picture, and then put it back where it belongs. That would be kind of a workaround, but the black sand never stays black. It's not actually sand. It's definitely not calcium-based, which is what we want in our reef tank. And it's not absorbing light, which means it is absorbing, it is not reflecting light. So it's not bouncing light back up on the underside of the corals, which is one of the reasons we don't like it. So people have done it. Some people like to put along, I saw this one tank in a presentation once where they put an acrylic barrier about 4 inches back, all the way across the tank, and then they put black sand across the front to have that black look, and then behind it was the regular sand. And it was still migrating back and forth and causing chaos. So we don't recommend it. It's just not ideal. You can try it out. You can see how you like it. You might decide after some time it's just not working out for you. But maybe it's better suited for freshwater systems than it is for our salt, especially our invertebrates. Jonathan, I hope I said that correct, said, I just started making shirts with reef-related prints. Can I send you one? What would you like to say or have on it? Man, I have so many ideas. Mandarins are not gobies. That would be my first one. Spock is a solid 5. That was another one. I mean, there's a whole list. But thank you very much for the offer. That's nice. Yeah, send me a message. We'll work out logistics. I'm a medium, by the way. Where are you located? Tell me more. Frags and Fish says, can we drink the water from an RODI system, or are they strictly for aquariums? We can drink RO water all day long. We cannot drink RODI water. And the reason we don't is it doesn't taste good. It tastes terrible. So if you have metal fillings in your teeth from cavities, the DI water will react. It's almost like you're chewing on tin foil. It just doesn't taste good because it's ion free. All those Gatorades that people buy, they're full of ions. They're full of enzymes. They're full of all the things that are good for us. DI water is so stripped clean, there's no benefit to the human body other than it's water. But other than that, it's not good water. So we never drink DI water, we drink the RO. So when people buy an RODI system, I always recommend, and that's why the one I sell, is an RO system with a separate DI. You can drink the RO water, you can make all the water you want, and then when you're ready to make tank water, you run the line into the DI and run the DI into your barrel to collect water to make salt water. That's the quick, easy answer. You will have a lot of people say, oh, if you drink it long term, it's going to kill you and all this stuff. But the thing is, there's so many other things that we eat and drink every single day. You really can't strip your body of all those essential elements that DI water could do. You would have to be like stranded in the desert, couldn't find water for weeks, and you stumble on an old rusted hulk of a car and you open the trunk and there's a trunk full of DI water and you start drinking it. And then it slowly withers you away because that's the only thing you put in your body. Yes, in that ridiculous scenario, DI water could harm you. But it just doesn't taste good, so what's the point? So just split off before the DI stage, make RO water, drink it. Bottled water oftentimes says RO or reverse osmosis water on the bottle, and it's totally safe to drink. So have no fear. Jerry's Little Reef says, how have you been able to successfully keep your copper band fish alive? When you're buying a copper band butterfly fish, you want to look at the store very carefully at the fish itself and see what condition it's in. Is it super thin? Is the stomach pinched? Is it covered in ick? And if everything about the fish looks perfect, then you want to tell the fish store owner, I need you to feed it. I want to see it eat. And if it puts in the food and that copper band doesn't eat food, do not buy it because it's not going to survive. But if it eats the food, then you not only can buy that fish, you need to buy that food the fish store used because that is the food that fish is recognizing and eating. Super, super important that you continue with it. And don't just think, well, I've got a food that's like that, so I can use it, because the copper band could be that picky. You know how they say cats are really picky and they won't eat certain foods and they just turn up their nose at you and walk away? Copper bands are like that too. So if you know a food that it's actually eating, get more of that food and plan on using it every single day in your tank to get it fed regularly, and then add other foods at the same time so maybe it'll pick something new and you can kind of wean it off of that one thing. I was adding bloodworms to my tank every single day to make sure that it had worms to eat, and then I noticed finally after many months she wasn't eating any of it, and I was like, oh. So I stopped putting in bloodworms in my tank because it wasn't helping. When I got her, she was eating brine shrimp, so I bought a ton of giant brine shrimp from the fish store. And I was pouring those things in day after day going, well, this is going to be expensive. But I got her from brine shrimp into eating mysis shrimp, and she loves mysis. And when I feed the tank and if I don't use mysis, I can see everyone eating, and she's like looking around like, where's the mysis? I'm like, oh, okay. So I go thaw some, because I was being a little bit lazy, or there was, I didn't add it that one night. So it's important to make sure they're getting the food they need. And even then, even if you do everything right, copper bands are kind of hit or miss, and you may not do well. Over all the years of my being in the hobby, I've only been able to keep 2 copper bands alive for a long term. The first one I had for 5 years. And this one I've had now for, I don't know, a year. And it's doing pretty good, but how will it go forever? I do not know. Derby City Reefer says, why Tracy Morgan? Like the comedian? Yeah, that's actually, it was named after that comedian. I don't know why. I think he saw it and he liked it. And so Joe named that coral after him. Because Joe gets to meet actors. That sometimes actors come into the Long Island Aquarium to film scenes or skits or whatever. And so he gets to meet some pretty famous people. Let's see, looking for the next question. Marine Life says, I like that. Marine Life, that's his name. That's his life. Says, I've been at home doing nothing and my reef tank has never looked better. Probably because I can't stop tinkering and doing maintenance on the tank. See, exactly. That's good. You know, there's so many hobbies out there where people do things. Like, make remote control cars. Or, man, the old days, you collected stamps. You know, and you would just sit there and do stuff with your hobby. This has got so much more return on investment because we get to see things grow. I guess it's almost like bonsai gardening, you know, where you're planting these little plants and you're trimming them to get the look and they grow over time and turn into something beautiful. And we do the same thing with saltwater animals. For me, the reason I love a reef tank so much is because I don't get to see enough reefs in the ocean. I don't get the opportunity to travel around the world and dive in reefs nearly enough. Usually I get to do it once or twice a year. That means out of 365 days, I might get 6 or 7 days of diving on reefs, and then the rest of the year I don't. So having it in my living room where I can walk up to it and study it and enjoy it and tinker with it, it's awesome. And my hobby literally became my business just because of the educational aspect. I always felt like teaching others as much as I had learned was going to help them avoid some of the pitfalls I went through. And so I've always focused on education. And in recent years, I've really been pushing my business. And I know that some people don't like that. And I actually don't like advertising myself. I kind of hate it. But I've had people say, Mark, you must do this. And so I do it. And it's really been good. My company has continued to grow. We don't know what's going to happen with coronavirus. I have no idea if it's going to cause my little thing to implode for a couple of months and then slowly rebuild, ground over time. I don't know. I just don't know. But I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping we're all going to be okay. We're going to get past this. They're going to find some cures. They're going to solve some problems. We're, as a nation, and I know I'm talking about an international group, but I mean each nation will build some kind of an internal immunity to this, just like a lot of people don't get the flu shot and they also don't get the flu. And so there's like a natural immunity that we build as a tolerance to resist catching the things that are out there that are, that can cause other people to be sick. So I'm hoping that we'll all be okay globally and we'll all get back to our normal lives again and, business as usual. But I still think of myself as a hobbyist. While others are like, no, you're not. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I still feel like I am one, I guess I don't have that arrogance gene in me. I don't have that that ego trip that some people suffer from. I just don't. I feel like we're all kind of on equal ground. We're all working together and we're all trying to figure things out. And we ask each other questions and we learn from each other. We get inspiration from each other. When you guys are posting something neat you made, I'm like, hey, that was really cool. I mean it. I'm not just saying it just to interact with you. I mean, I thought what you did was really cool. And, that makes them happy. It made me happy. And we're all happy together. That's how it should be. I've never been one that was jealous of my neighbor. Sometimes we joke, oh, I'm so jealous. I'm really never jealous. Like they get a really nice car and I'm like, man, I love that car. I wish I had one like that. But that's as far as it goes. And actually on some level, I'm more like, I'm really happy they were able to get that car. I'm happy for them that they got what they wanted. That's how I've looked at it. And, I went years with the same vehicle. I had a Ford Explorer for 14 years. And, people are like, oh, that's the Ford Exploder. And mine never exploded. And I drove it for almost 150,000 miles. And it was paid off after whatever it took, 5 or 6 years. I had no car payments for like 9 years. It was 8 or 9 years. It was awesome. And now I have a car payment for a few more years. But at the same time, I have a really nice truck right now, and I really like it. And people say, man, I love your truck. I'm like, oh, thanks. I appreciate that. But I've never had that thing where like, oh, I wish my tank was like their tank, or I wish that my house was like, I mean, we all desire certain things, but I've never been jealous of people having success. I'm happy that they're successful and doing well. And I'd love to have some success too. I hope that made sense and came across the right way. Glenn P says, I'm building a sump. The first chamber has a bulkhead to the next chamber via a roller mat. It's very low, about 3 inches from the bottom. Will water rise to fill the rest of the refugium, so on higher than 3 inches? What'll happen is the first section where the bulkhead is low and the water is low, as the water rises, the water on the other side will rise to equal the same height. So if your first chamber you're thinking was going to be really low, it's not going to stay low. Water always seeks the same height and then drops off to the next low and the next and the next and the next, down, down, down. So you probably need to take your roller mat and lift it up X amount of inches to get it to sit in 3 inches of water. That's like on the sumps I've been building recently for people that have the Clarisy roller, fleece roller. I will make them a stand that's 6, 8 inches tall to only put the bottom 2 inches of the Clarisy down in the water, and the rest of it's exposed to air. So that's what you're going to do. Jedi Knight says, I'm wondering why someone wants me to chime in. I'm a newbie with an overstocked 90 gallon and an all-in-one 13.5 gallon. I'm hooked on the hobby and I'm back after 20 years. Well, welcome back. You've missed out on a lot, but you've come in at a great time. There's a lot of cool things these days that we have. The equipment we have these days supersedes so much of what you used 20 years ago. I'm sure to some degree it's even a little bit overwhelming because you're like, wow, there's something for everything these days. And there's a lot of home automation, things that we use in our tanks that makes life so much easier, but it also leaves so many things to break. It's sort of like you get this car and it's got all these cool accessories where all you wanted was a steering wheel, a gas pedal, a brake pedal, and a transmission. And maybe, some doors and windows would be nice, right? But then, you add all these accessories, and then, like one day you try to roll up the window and the little button doesn't do anything, or your automatic lock unlocks 3 out of 4 doors, or the fuel gauge light comes on even though the tank's full of gas, and you're like, man, because we have more features, so there's more things that can go wrong. And that can be a little frustrating. But we really do have some really nice gear, and the best part is a lot of the gear we buy these days is DC powered, which means low voltage, less electricity consumption. It actually, we're spending less money maintaining livestock. And we have learned so much about keeping livestock that we didn't know 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you were hoping you could keep this alive. And if you did 6 months, 9 months, a year, you're like a hero. And now we've got stuff where people are growing things from a single polyp. People are spawning things in their tanks and growing out from that, and they're growing their own foods. I mean, there's a lot going on. And so keep up the good work, man. Enjoy your new tanks. You say it's overstocked. Well, enjoy the tank, and at some point you're going to have to upgrade. I knew there's a reason I liked Andrea. She's an only child too. Yay. All right. Tim says, what camera do you take most of your pictures with? The iPhone or a real camera? They are so high quality. I have the iPhone 11 Pro, which is for the super easy quick shots. And then I use the Polyp Labs clip-on onto my phone all the time to get rid of the blue so that things look right. And I really do like that, and it works great on the Anemone Cube. It just depends on time of day. But I have a Nikon D90 that was probably made in 2009. Super old. But if I wanted to upgrade the body because of the age of my camera body, I would have to upgrade the lenses too. It would be an expensive upgrade to get a better camera. And I'm really resisting the urge because I'm talking about really the full upgrade probably push me $3,000 to $4,000. And I'm not a super duper fan of that idea. I use my Nikon regularly. I have like 4 or 5 lenses for it. I used it last night to shoot product shots for Prodibio to put on my website. And throw this up here really quick because it's handy. Turn this off. So this is product shots I took last night. I have a little photo area where I put all my products and then shoot, and then I have to go edit them and stick them on the website. And so these are the 9 items I added to the website last night. And when I'm taking pictures of the tank, I really do like to use the Nikon to get macro shots of corals, to get the full tank shot, because I can go into Lightroom and I can clean it up, I can remove the blue, I can sharpen, I can remove spots that bother me. I don't do a lot, I don't mess with it. You know, I'm not in there turning it into something way better than it is. I'm trying to get it to look as accurate as possible to what my eye sees in person. And I've been doing that for a very long time. And occasionally I get people that will say, hey Mark, you know, your tank looks exactly like your pictures. And I'm like, well, good. I'm doing a good job. That's exactly what I would hope. You know, I don't want you to sit there and say, oh man, your pictures are amazing. Why don't your corals look like that? And I've had some people, you know, over the years, I mean, some recently, some in the past, say, your corals are really brown. And they're looking at it during the daylight period when it's 10K. This is 20K lighting. It's not going to look good right now because of the webcam. But for example, I showed you guys that picture before, but let's do this. So we'll switch this now to this. So now you can see the tank with 2 filters on my Polyp Labs lens, and I can adjust the darkness down to make it look a little cleaner, or I can go too bright, obviously, and wash it out. I can remove one of these filters, and you still have some of the blue, but it's not as bad as it was. And here's something interesting that a lot of people don't think about. When they're taking pictures and they're like, oh, it doesn't look right, I don't like it, you know, I'm not happy. A lot of times it's because you're in a room next to a, whoops, just a second. If I can get this thing to move where I want it. What is going on here? So you're taking the picture with your phone next to blue lighting, and so when you're doing it, and you're looking at the camera and you're taking your shot, then you look at the result and you're like, oh, it doesn't look good. But when you get away from all this blue light and you're like in another room, you're like, hey, it actually looks pretty good. I can put that on Instagram. So I really do like this for filtering out the iPhone pictures and get them right. I've heard people swear that the Samsung does a fantastic job with lighting on aquariums and you don't have to do anything special. And while I'm very happy for those people that they have it even easier, then I should be seeing way more coral pictures posted by them because they're so proud of their cameras. DPRP Shift says, why do some macros turn green? There's 2 different ways corals can turn green. They can turn green internally or they can turn green externally. So like let's say you had a coral that was kind of reddish and then it shifted into that green spectrum. That could be because there's an abundance of nutrients in the water. Also, it could be a difference in potassium levels in your water, which is one of those things we don't really talk about very much. A lot of times corals turn toward the browns, and that's because of nutrient levels being too high in the tank. But when you're talking about green internally, like you break open the acropora and inside it's a white skeleton, the white skeleton is green, that's actually called green boring algae. And it bores into the skeleton of the coral, and it's kind of like an infection within. And then the coral one day just dies, and you see this big green skeleton. You're like, oh, no, that makes sense. I see why it happened. When you're there's other things that can come into play that change the color of corals to where they don't look like what they should look like. And it could even be the amount of which spectrum of light you're using each day. It could be the intensity of the light, or like I said before, it's the water quality. A lack of iodine, too much barium, or boron, I mean. There's certain things that happen in our tanks that we have to correct. Silica can be too high. Salinity could be wrong. You know, and as we get those things dialed in tighter and tighter, we start to see more and more nice corals. And also, sometimes things start off really beautiful as frags and turn into kind of a semi-decent looking but kind of sort of boring coral, because all the excitement, all the growth from that initial frag is where the best parts are. And if you were to cut off a piece off of your colony that's green, put on a frag plug, put it in your tank in some other location, you might start to see all kinds of interesting colors happening on that one because it's trying to burst with excitement, with new growth, and there's a lot going on. It's weird, and I think that's why people love buying frags so much, because they're so crazy colorful, and they're saying, when that thing is this big, it's gonna be amazing. And it's like, yeah, sometimes they just are big and pretty, but they're not like that frag was initially. By the way, you've got a really pretty acro as your profile pic, and that one there has some purple in it, but if the entire thing just turned solid green, I would be thinking something's not right with the tank. Glenn P says, I've been cutting acrylic very poorly. On my website, I have an entire section talking about working with acrylic and all the tools I use and all the tools I used to use. And you can definitely go through that. And I mean, I built sumps for years with a table saw and a handheld router. So I'm sure that you can do better. You just need some practice. Just another nanotank says, I watched Z Reefs feed frozen cubes to all his anemones. One by one. He snapped them out of them like ice cubes and put them in the anemones, and it blew my mind. Yeah, me too. That's crazy. I'd rather see, that's crazy because it's a frozen little thing. And I would think it would kind of do some freezer burn on the anemone's tentacles and possibly on their mouth. Let's see. I made that thing so big I can't shrink it back down. So what I would rather see the person do is thaw the cube and then put it in the anemones, if they want to do that. Or thaw krill, which are small little shrimp, and put those in each anemone. I never feed mine. I've seen people feed their fish frozen food, and while they can do it, they can gnaw on it, and the water's 78 degrees, so it's going to melt as they're chipping away at it with their mouths. It's sort of like saying, here's a steak out of the freezer, enjoy your dinner. I'd rather thaw it for a few minutes. I mean, 5-10 minutes on the counter is not a big deal, and I let the food dissipate all over the tank. And maybe that's why I don't have to target feed my corals, because I pour in this frozen food that goes all over the place, and then my vortex just blow it everywhere. Blake Scott says, what's the best way to control phosphate? I have ample nitrates, less than 10. However, I cannot seem to keep phosphate, and I'm having to dose in a 20-gallon. Can't keep phosphate. In other words, your phosphate is so low, you need to dose phosphate? Get back to me so I know what you're asking. Let's see. Marcus says, do you dose amino acids? I dose Acropower, which is an amino acid. All right, time for me to sit down. Aaron Walter says, how did you get into reefing? Well, I got divorced. And the day I got divorced, I went straight to the fish store with my divorce papers in my hand and bought myself an aquarium. And the rest is history. But after a couple of years of just keeping an aquarium with some rock and some clownfish and a feather duster and, I don't know, a long-nosed butterfly, things like that, I started to learn more about corals going to MACNA in 2002. And MACNA is a 3-day educational event where every question you've ever had will be answered. And I went to that thing, and I went to 15 talks in 3 days and learned so much information. Now I knew about reefing, and so ever since 2002, I've had an abundance of knowledge. I'm always learning more. Spent a lot of time on forums, reading, learning, sharing what I was doing, documenting. I documented a ton of stuff on my website so that people could read the blogs, read the articles, find solutions to problems like hair algae and nitrate and biopellets and photography. And I kept focusing on that. And while I was doing all that, I was cleaning floors for a living, stripping and waxing floors. And then after, 7 years of that, I was sick of cleaning floors, and I said, I'm just going to make money with Milo's Reef, or I'm going to starve to death, and I won't have to work ever again because I'll be dead. And I'm still alive, and I'm even overweight. Kevin Jones says, would it be unethical for me to purchase a young yellow tang in a 35-gallon tank? My mom and pop shop said they would exchange it for a young one. Well, I don't like the idea of a yellow tank in a tank that small. This tank here is a 60 gallon. So your tank is half the size of this, and I have a hippo tank in here. And it's been there for a couple of years, and I have people that tell me from time to time, why do you have that in there still? I would think if you can get a yellow tank this big, yes, you can enjoy it in that tank for a little while. And yes, you could possibly trade it in with a fish store and get another small one and kind of do it like that indefinitely. But really, almost always when it comes to tangs, it's recommended that you put them in a tank that's 6 feet long because these fish swim long distances in the ocean, in nature. So we want them to have the ability to be comfortable. And putting them in a very small box where they can barely move in a circle, not great. And that's why people were like, why don't you move the hippo? Now, when the vet was here, she saw Dory and said, looks great, I'm very happy with her. There's nothing wrong with that fish. She avoids the tentacles and this time of day. But in the morning, there's less tentacles, and late at night, there's less tentacles. She swims all over the place. But when I get near the tank, she always darts into the rockwork. It's not like she's going to be easy to catch. She is the most skittish fish I've had in a long, long time. And when I do stuff, she just vanishes. So the day I catch her is going to be quite the process. Since I'm on this side of the tank, I need the glass to be clean because I can't stand it. So let me do this right quick. This type of algae that grows on here is a weird algae. It's like a brown spot that really grabs on the glass, and a cleaning magnet doesn't get rid of it. So I'm using something called the Easy Blade that's connected to a mag float, and it scrapes it off. And then when I do this, all of a sudden I can see beautiful anemones again. And it's just been such a busy week, I hadn't had a chance to do this at all. So now it's a lot better. We should talk about why I hate rimless tanks. All right, let's find another question. Sizzle Reef says, I'm setting up a new tank and would like to start cycling my rock in trash cans. What bacteria product would you use and for how long? You can put the rock in the trash cans now. And let me adjust this a little bit here. Bring it down. You can adjust it. You can put the rock in the trash cans now with salt water. You'll probably want a heater for nighttime. A big pump, like a mag pump that moves the water. Not like a Powerhead, not like a MaxiJet. Maybe a Vortec, maybe a Nero 5, something that moves a lot of water. And then you could use Live Rock Enhance, and that would be one way that would be really good. I think you dose that a couple times a week, and it's a scoop of powder per 25 gallons of water. So your trash can is going to have like 30 gallons of water. You're going to put in like a scoop and a half or 2 scoops in there, and that will help eat any kind of bacteria that's on the rock. Because you said, you said cycling your rock. You didn't say it was dry rock or live rock, but let's assume it's dry rock. The Live Rock Enhance will help populate with some bacteria. If it's live rock that has decay on it, it will eat the decay. It'll actually clean it up and get it prepared. And you can just put that in the barrel, like I said, twice a week for about 4 weeks or so. You could change the water once or twice during that period if you wanted to kind of remove whatever's in the water column itself and kind of give it fresh salt water. And the longer the better. The longer you can cook it in a barrel, the better it'll be for when you're ready to set up your tank. You could go months. You can go 2-3 months long. I just got a product, I haven't even unboxed it yet, from Brightwell. It's a cycling kit that comes with 3 different bottles. And I just found out about it. I said, you know what? Send me some kits. Because a lot of people want to start new tanks, and I thought, the thing is, I like to sell things I use myself. So when I do this kind of stuff, I kind of feel a little, I feel a little bit off. I feel a little bit misleading because I try to sell the things I use. But I'm not starting a new tank. So I can't say I've used this. But it sounded promising. It's from Brightwell, and it's designed for tanks that use dry rock to help get things established and to avoid some of the uglies that people go through. And I was like, that sounds actually really interesting. So I said, send me some kits I can put on my website. And I know one of the bottles is the actual ammonia used to start the cycle. And the rest I don't remember by heart. But that's going to be coming out soon. I'll be talking about it on Facebook and Instagram as well. Christoph says, can you speak of how to clean dinos the natural way? There is no natural way to kill dinoflagellates. They are a real problem. What I usually tell people when it comes to dinoflagellates is to go ahead and remove as much of it as they can from the system manually. So as usual, I always say turn off all the flow in the tank. That way as you scrape things off or you remove things, it doesn't blow everywhere. If it's on the sand, I would put it together in a pile, like with a scraper, and just scrape it, rake it together into a pile, and then I would siphon out that pile and throw that away. Throw away whatever sand you lost, throw away the dinoflagellates, just get rid of it, get it out of the tank. If it's on your lock line or your flow accelerators, remove that piece of plumbing, clean it in the sink with vinegar and water or citric acid and water, and then put it back in the tank clean. If it's on the feeding magnet, clean that off. If it's on the cleaning magnet itself, clean that. If it's on a frag rack, remove the frag rack. Anything you can remove and get it out of the system is my approach when it comes to dinoflagellates. Water changes don't help. They actually make it worse. You have to top off, so you can't help that because evaporation's occurring. Some people try to wrap their tank with a lot of cardboard or plastic bags to stop all the light from getting in there. That's not a guaranteed solution. That's sort of like just kind of slows it down, and then when they reveal it, it just starts to bloom again. So it's it almost needs to go through its entire phase to reach, to where it's consumed everything it could possibly consume, and then it implodes and goes away. But it's one of the things that makes people quit the hobby. It's really hard to fight, and it's super frustrating. I have made comments in previous streams about possibly using LiveRock Enhanced to fight dinoflagellates because it's a decay-eating bacteria, and that seems to work for some people. It takes weeks, months, maybe even longer, just dosing regularly to help dwindle it away. But that is one approach that seems to be working for some people. Fauna Marin makes a product called Dino X, which is like a 3-week treatment period that works. Some people have tried using 3% peroxide, which is a 1-week treatment period, but it's not guaranteed. Again, if you removed all you possibly could from the tank and then you did the peroxide treatment, you might get lucky. I did. I just had a little bit of my tank, and I handled it really early on before it could get out of control. And in previous tanks in the past, I had some of it growing in the refugium, and I would take like a big spoon, like a big serving spoon, and I lowered it in the water to where the dinos on the surface of the water would flood into the spoon, and I would dump the spoon out into a bowl, and I would do it again and do it again, and I was getting that all off the surface before it could get into my tank. So I'm always about being proactive now before it gets bigger and out of control. Just Another Nano Tank says, grab a strong drink with us today, please. No more coffee, brother. Well, it's almost 5 o'clock. It's almost time for a cocktail. I'm just not a big, heavy drinker, but I do like to drink. Let's see. Neo Geo says, what size is your anemone tank? What brand? I'm looking to get a cube and possibly plumb it off my main tank. This one here was made by AGE. Man, it looks so much better since I cleaned the glass. It's made by AGE. It's 24 by 24 by 24. It has Starfire on 3 sides. The back was regular glass, and I put a black vinyl on there back in 2013. And it has a PVC bottom. It did not have an overflow box, so I had to drill it myself to put an overflow box in there internally. And that's what I used, and I've been using. I was looking at possibly getting a water box to replace it because it's 6 years old. And water box doesn't actually make a true cube. Like, they might have a 24 by 24 by 18. It's not quite 24 up, so it'd be a little less water in it. But it was something I was looking at because I like the look. And they're also tanks made with Starfire. I also am not a big fan of rimless because when you're working in the tank, a lot of times the water will splash over and run down the side, Or you'll always have these water spots along the top, and I hate those water spots. And you can never keep it clean. You can wipe it, but it's always back, and you're constantly doing it. And also where the water wiggles, you'll get a calcium deposit that you have to use a razor blade to chisel off. And so those are some of the reasons I don't like rimless, and much rather have a Eurobrace tank that is more reinforced and has, you know, a thick piece of glass all the way around. So when you're cleaning with a magnet, it sloshes about the, you know, up and hits the Eurobrace and comes right back in the tank and doesn't roll over the outside. Because when it comes out the outside and it gets wet here and you're still using your magnet, the backside of your dry magnet is now wet and you're just putting salt slosh all over the glass. And now you have to clean the glass another time with another product. So I'm not a big fan of that. Forzak says, I have a Red Sea Reefer 170 and I don't have space for a refugium. Is an algae reactor a viable replacement for this? Potentially it can be. I'm still learning about them myself. The algae, you said algae reactor, you didn't say algae turf scrubber. You might be talking about one of those things where there's lights and they put ketomorphin inside the middle. That is something people are trying out and seems to be doing pretty well. Some people notice that works great the first month, but I've seen a lot of people say, like after the first month, it just doesn't seem to work anymore. It's not doing anything. And I'm curious why that is. You know, what did those plants consume, or what did they strip out of the tank so much so that nothing else will grow in the reactor thereafter? That's an interesting question that needs to be resolved or determined. An algae turf scrubber is a gizmo where water flows through a sheet like the one I'm running under my tank, which is ginormous. And that one is supposedly going to replace my refugium, but I have to see how it does for the next few months to know for a fact if that's what's going to happen. Jessica says, do you know if Spock's fish vet treats corals? No, she is a fish-only person. She doesn't do anything about corals. Dean says, when does CyanoRx kill... Wait. When... I assume you're asking, can Cyano or red CyanoRx kill sponges? I don't think so. I think that the cyanobacteria can kill your sponges, but the product that is in whatever is in that box, it kills the bacteria inside the cyanobacteria. And it may even kill off some beneficial bacteria too. But I've never heard anyone say they lost sponges to that. Like when they're trying to get rid of the red algae on the sand, I've never heard them say my sponges all died at the same time. Jay asks, any tips for clams for acclimation? Yeah, when you get a clam, I haven't done this in so long, I barely remember. When you get a clam, you're going to want to go ahead and float the bag to get the temperature of the water the same as your aquarium. But we don't dip clams. We don't put them in any kind of medications. We normally just move them from the bag directly into the tank. And when you take the clam out of the bag, we usually like to put it on its side, make sure it's closed, and move it into the tank and then turn it right side up. We don't want the water to drain out of the clam and have a big air pocket within there because the air is not beneficial to the clam. So that is one thing. You can kind of hold a clam in your hand sideways and kind of shake it a little bit to maybe underwater to kind of avoid any possible air being trapped inside and then stand it in place. It's really good to put it on a solid foundation. They make clam cradles that you set the clam on, and it allows it to put its foot right down and hold on to the cradle. And then you can move the clam with its cradle anywhere in your tank. So if you don't like one spot, you can move it to another spot. Some people like to put the clams up high in the rockwork. Sometimes the clam stays there. A lot of times they jump off and go to the bottom, and they're down on the sand. But I really like the cradle. It really kind of keeps them where they want to be, and they feel secure. But like I said, you can kind of move it somewhere, and it may not mind being lifted, airlifted, so to speak, to a new location. Occasionally, there's things called pinched mantle disease that happens with clams, to where you do take the clam out of the reef tank and you dip it in fresh water for like 5 minutes. Well, it's a bath, not a dip. And it's very nerve-wracking. I mean, I just think it's a terrible idea to do, right? But apparently it works, and I've done it a couple times myself out of desperation because I was trying to save the clam. The water in the bath has to be exactly the same as your tank, and the pH has to be the same as your tank. And you can move the clam into there for like 5 minutes, and it'll open up, and it's actually filtering that water, and it kind of knocks off the evil things off of the clam's innards, and you can put the clam back in salt water, and it might survive. So that's kind of a last-ditch effort. And also, just so you know, when you get a clam, if it's really, really tiny, you got to feed really heavily. So like lots of phytoplankton in the system. As they get bigger and their mantle grows wider, they will feed more off of the lighting in your tank than off of the actual filter feeding. So while they do filter feed, they're benefiting from photosynthesis within their zooxanthellae inside their mantle. So that's actually what makes them easier to take care of. They are definitely going to be demanding alkalinity and calcium, absolutely. Probably some magnesium to some degree. And they like some nitrate in the water. So if the tank has no nitrate, the clam probably will not do well. And also, when a clam dies, it dies very, very fast. Like, it might look bad today and tomorrow it's gone. I mean, it's like a one day. So that is something just to be aware of, that you might have 5 great years and then poof, in one day it's gone. It just happens. It's kind of hard. Furlock says, do you prefer using liquid or powder-based supplements when you mix your own for magnesium, calcium, alkalinity? All those 3 you mentioned are powders. The one that I use for my calcium is this one. I'm sorry, magnesium is this one. I love this stuff. It's called Magnesium Pronto. I sell it on my website. It's 2 different types of magnesium inside here. And this jar mixes up to almost 5 gallons of magnesium, which is fantastic. And I think it's like 20 bucks. And I've been using this on my reef for the last, I'd say 3 years, ever since I found out about it. I mix it up. I have a very specific recipe. The recipe is on my website, on this, where you find this in the shop. And I think it's 1 tablespoon per 12 ounces of water. And I will mix up a container with 120 ounces of water and 10 tablespoons, and I stir it up for 5 minutes with a wooden spoon, never use metal. And then after it's settled and turned clear, I hook up to a dosing pump, and the dosing pump then will trickle it in until the jug is empty. And like I said, I really like this stuff. The alkalinity, you can make your own with baking soda, the same stuff that's Arm & Hammer that we put in the refrigerator. Those are 99 cents. You can bake that. That recipe for that is on my website. And after an hour of baking it, then you put it in a Ziploc container, and then you can use it for alkalinity. 2 cups of that stuff with 1 gallon of water makes you a gallon of alkalinity. And you'll probably get, it depends what size Arm & Hammer box you buy, but you can definitely get a gallon out of one of those little boxes for $1. And then calcium, you have to buy calcium chloride from somebody. I sell all 3 of those powders on my website too. Let's see. Answered that. Tank Tools says, I recently got a bubble coral in over 15 years. First one he's ever got. And it's softball size, but has these crazy 5 to 6 inch sweepers. Is that normal? I don't remember them being so long before. Yes, that is normal. And they definitely can run the sweepers toward other corals downstream. So you want to make sure your bubble coral is in a spot where it really can't affect anything near it. And yeah, that is very normal. And a lot of times those come out specifically at night, sometimes when they're feeding. I grew a really nice bubble coral in this tank for a few years. And then I think it got shaded. Now I just have a dead skeleton covered in Aiptasia and bubble algae. It's my skeleton of shame right now. I need to remove it from the tank. But it was so pretty. It was gorgeous. And I grew it from a little tiny frag. And it grew into something about this big. And then it just got smaller. And I thought, what is going on with this coral? And I should have moved it into this tank, and I just never did. It's totally my own fault. Let's see. We should wrap this up. We're coming up on 3 hours, and I'm sure you guys have tons of other things you need to be doing. Let's see. Carson says, my new tank just finished cycling, and I want to add a refugium and a skimmer at some point. Which should I add first, and how do I know if it's a good one to add? Good time to add it. So your tank is cycling, or just finished cycling. At this point, you're about ready to start putting livestock in, so now is a great time to put the protein skimmer on there. And get that guy going, make sure that it's running properly, make sure it's not overflowing. Try to center that protein skimmer in the middle of your sump, so if it does overflow, it overflows into the sump and not over the edge of the sump and all over the cabinet or all over the floor. And then in a couple of months or so, then you could try to add the refugium as your nutrient level rises, because you've added more livestock, you're feeding more frequently, and the tank has some nutrients for the plants to grow upon. If you put in plants now in the refugium zone, they won't survive because there's nothing for them to feed on. You know, just putting a plant and then putting a light over it's not enough. It needs nutrients. There was a product that's been around forever called Miracle-Gro. Yes, we can put a plant in a pot and we can put it by the window and it'll grow. And we can pour water on it once a week and it lives. But if you mix Miracle-Gro in the water and put it in, the plant grows so much more because there's a whole bunch of nutrients in that Miracle-Gro. It's the same principle with a reef tank or the refugium. You need to have a tank full of nutrients because the refugium will utilize the nutrients. It'll utilize the light to grow the macro. You're going to remove some macro from the refugium from time to time and encourage more growth from what remains behind. But putting it in too soon, it'll do nothing and probably even just die off. Mickey says, what clam would you recommend for a bare bottom tank with 2 Kessel 160s? And at what par level do you recommend? Well, there's a lot of different ones available. There are Maximas, there are Croceas. Do not get a Gigas. Gigas are giant clams. Even if they're small, they become giant. I mean, like 24, 36 inches across. That won't work in your 20-gallon tank. But you want to make sure that you have at least a minimum of 200 par down there on the bottom. The clam will probably try to hold on to the glass with its foot. It may even walk around a little bit, or jet around and then put a foot down somewhere. The clam cradle would be good to kind of keep it in one spot, like secure, so it's not just exposed on the bottom side. They really do like to feel like they're nestled into something solid. I'm trying to think what other clams are there. Durasa is another one, but those get pretty big. I really like Maximas. I've always loved the look of a Maxima. I think you should shop at your fish store and see what they got, or shop online and see what's available at Live Aquaria and see what appeals to you. But you're definitely going to be looking at 150, 200 par down at the bottom. I know you have 2 lights on that small tank, so that's pretty good. Make sure the lights aren't too far away from the water, maybe 8 to 10 inches away from the water. And then your tank isn't super tall because it's a 20-gallon, so it might even be 20 liter. Anyway, it's small enough that it doesn't have to penetrate deep like it would on here, for example. But I would, that's kind of where I'd go. Check your par and see if you can even handle it, if you can even do it. Adrian says, I treated my tank with ChemiClean. I already did a 50% water change, but my skimmer's still overflowing. So there's a video on this channel that says, make it stop, because the protein skimmer overflows. And basically the video is just going to tell you in a matter of minutes, you want the protein skimmer to continue to overflow into a nearby bucket forever until it stops. And I know that's frustrating, but all you're going to do is you're going to disable your top-off system, and you're going to let the skimmer dump as much as it needs to, or if you have to manually dump it every 10 minutes, just dump it, dump it, dump it, dump it. And then when you've dumped out, I don't know, you've got a bucket, so you know how much water you've removed. You've removed 2 gallons, 3 gallons, 4 gallons. Put in 3, 4 gallons of salt water back into the sump so that the water level is the same. And what'll happen is that within a matter of a few hours, the protein skimmer will completely settle down and you'll be done. So basically you did your big water change. Now you're going to have to do a little bit more water change because of the skimmer. Now, a trick that some people do, I've not done it myself personally, but it definitely is doable, is to move your top off container, like you normally would top off with RO water, RODI. You could then instead fill it with salt water, or you could have a separate container of salt water and put the top off pump in that and let that top off into your sump as the protein skimmer is dumping into a bucket. But you still have to make sure the bucket doesn't overflow. I remember when I was doing my big 280 gallon reef, I ran ChemiClean and I did my big water change and the skimmer wouldn't stop overflowing, and so I said, I don't care. I just took the cup and I dumped it into a bucket, and I dumped into a bucket, and I dumped into a bucket. And I did it over and over. And what I noticed was like, it would be full in like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, like, God. So I'd dump it out. And then I could go like 10 minutes before I had to dump it out. And then it was like 15 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm making progress. And I didn't dump out the buckets. I actually put 3 buckets in a row. I was very curious how much the skimmer would remove. And in the end, it had exported watery water. I mean, it didn't look bad, but it just didn't like it. It exported 14 gallons of water from my system. So I put 14 gallons of salt water in the sump, and that was it. The skimmer was back to normal. It took a total of maybe 6 hours to get things under control. So that's basically what you're going to do. And then your skimmer will work just like it's supposed to. Cindy, I'm glad you're happy with your RODI system. That's great. I love mine too. Dylan says, I cleaned my return pump this week. Wow, was it bad? Do you have a schedule for long-term maintenance and can we join in on your schedule as chances are we might not get it done otherwise? Yeah, certain things we should do all the time. And I've actually done a video stream just about, maintenance. And we have certain things we have to do all the time. There's certain things we do occasionally. I really like to clean a protein skimmer at least once a year. If you can do it twice a year, even better. I also highly recommend that we clean our return pump a minimum of once a year. Circulation pumps on reactors should be cleaned at least once a year, possibly twice, depending on what you're encountering, what you're seeing. Lighting should be wiped down every couple of months so that it's not covered in salt creep. And I like to clean the sump every couple of months. I'd say deep cleaning is sort of like spring cleaning on your house. You really want to go through and clean everything because it's just that time. And I think once a year we should do that with our tank. Just top to bottom, just start cleaning every single thing you can possibly imagine to make it back to the day it was the day you bought it. And I think that kind of routine can be good. Now you can set up reminders in ReefTrace, the app that I recommend. If you're using Apex Fusion, it has a reminder or notes in there as well. There's other apps you can do. I mean, there's so many ways to remind you to do things. If you have a physical calendar hanging on the wall, you could put on there June 1st, change RO filters. January 1st, change RO filters. You can do that. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing this. But bottom line is, you need to do it. And I think a lot of times we forget about stuff because it's out of sight or it's so cluttered you can't get to it, and so we don't deal with it. Let's see. I feel like I'm still way behind on the chat. Russell Andrews asked a question to you guys, not to me. He says, what's your best ick treatment? Well, number one, I refuse to get ick in my tank. I'm not a fish disease guy, so I don't have a cure. There really is no in-tank ick treatment that's guaranteed. No matter how many things we find on the market, no matter how many things we wish would work, no matter how many people said it worked for them, it doesn't work. You have to remove the fish from the tank. They need to go into quarantine, and hyposalinity is one of the most effective ways. The secondary way that's popular is to use copper to treat for ick, but you have to stay on top of it. You have to make sure that the levels don't get too high, and it takes a long time. Hyposalinity takes, I'd say, minimum of 3 weeks at 1.009 specific gravity, and then you have to bring up salinity very slowly over a period of weeks, which is why we say that your tank will be fishless for basically 12 weeks or 3 months, because you've got To bring salinity down, got to keep it down for 3 weeks straight. It cannot go up, not even a speck. It has to stay 1.009 every single day for 21 days. If it goes up, you got to bring it back to 9 and start the clock again for 21 days. It's very important. And then after the 21 days, then you have to gradually bring salinity back all the way up a little tiny bit every single day, all the way until you get back to 1.026. And that can take weeks. And then finally, after all those weeks, then you can finally put your fish on the tank. And because the tank was fishless for 12 weeks, any ick that remained in the tank will have died off because it had no source to consume, because there's no fish to snack on. And so you have an ick-free tank. You hopefully now have fish that have zero ick on them, and you can put them in your tank, and then any new fish have to go through quarantine to make sure they don't introduce a disease into your tank to your healthy fish. Jeremiah says, have you tried the aquarium camera app yet, Mark? I used it a while back. I was trying it out when it first came out, but I love my Polyp Labs clip. It's super easy to use. I might have to check it out again. Maybe it's better. Nick Walter says, I have been setting up my doser today, and I have used the tubing provided, but was wondering if I can use RO tubing instead. You might be able to. It just depends on the connections. Or maybe their tubing will fit onto the end of some RO tubing, and you can continue it to wherever it needs to go. Sometimes we cobble together some of the craziest stuff to make our stuff work. And you just have to find what works and what fits and how it cooperates. Skinner says, how do you test for silicates? Normally we don't. What we do is we send in a water sample for an ICP analysis, and we get the results back from them. And sometimes it's recommended to send a couple of tests in to kind of make sure that the results we get is accurate. Okay, so Kurt says, what is the actual name of the Gorgonian? Let me see if it's on my critter ID, because I probably have the actual name there. So it would be a soft coral. There it is. All right. So we'll go here. It's this one right here. Pseudoplexora species. And hey, look, I got it in 2012. So I've had it for 8 years. Cool. Look, when it was cute and small. That was about 3 years ago after I'd fragged it. So it's grown quite a bit since then. It's about double the size of my tank behind me right now. So there's the name. Pseudoplexora species. Asked and answered. I love my website. I try to put everything there so I don't have to remember it here. And that way it's always available. If someone asks a question, I can say, oh yeah, let me look that up. MetroCat is here. Look at them shoes. She ain't messing around. Yeah, the Brightwell order got here, Kat. Thanks very much for your help. Let's see. Looking for another question. Beth says they're eating out. Small towns don't worry about this too much. Population of 285. All right, well, be safe. Don't touch your face like I always do. And wash your hands. And let's hope your small town doesn't get an infection. I'm kind of in the mood. I know this sounds really... Okay, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to explain it. I have been in the mood for Chinese food for the last week or two because I have a fantastic place down the street that makes food, and it's It's takeout only. They'll deliver or you can pick it up. You can't eat there. It's not a restaurant. It's a kitchen. And I love their food. But I've had people say, I'm not eating Chinese food because of Corona. That doesn't even occur to me. It's the food. Sweet and sour chicken, rice, egg roll, almond cookie. That's what I want. You know, it's not what nation it's from. Just like if I like, man, I really want Italian food, I might go Olive Garden. Well, Italy, a lot of people died. Does that mean I'm not going to eat Italian food? I mean, come on. You know, it's like they're so unrelated. But it's funny that even that was brought up as a potential discussion point with some people. But the reason I haven't gotten it is because that stuff makes me fat. I eat it, it's so yummy, and I just put on the pounds. So I've been really resisting the urge to go out to eat out. So I'm down 16, 17 pounds. I'm trying to lose another 10 if possible. And I'm very happy with where I am, but I don't want to go back up. And so I'm trying to be aware of what I'm eating here at the house. So on the counter, I've got a bunch of fruit, which I have not been eating, which I need to eat. I need to avoid the scurvy, right? And so I got to eat oranges, and I've got some bananas that won't last, so I got to devour them. I've got some apples, because they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, so I should be really eating some of those. And maybe I'll do it right after this stream, because I got to eat something. I'm really hungry. Let's see. Marine Life says, what are your thoughts on the Red Sea PO4 and nitrate remover? You must be talking about Nopox. I used it for a while. I didn't have the success I wanted. I dealt with a lot of slime in my system that drove me bonkers. I kept cleaning it out every single, God, it seems like weekly and monthly I was cleaning out this horrible pink slime. I could not seem to get it under control. It never got better. I mean, yes, my nitrates came down some, but I finally had to wean the tank off it because I couldn't take it anymore. And I probably used about 5 bottles total on this system behind me. So that's why I'm going a different route, trying something different. But there are people out there that have used Nopox with excellent success, and they tell great stories of how happy they are. I wish my story was the same. Marquette says, what is the favorite food for Spock? I recently added a blonde, and he's not eating as much as I'd like. Nori, bubble algae, banana, anything frozen, Rod's food, krill, PE mysis, flake food, pellet food, pretty much anything. She'll eat it all. Let's give her some banana. Let me, let's see, what can we do here? Got these bananas covered in brown dots. They are definitely not going to last much longer. Hey, Spock, look, she sees it. All right. So we'll do this. She loves some banana. I'm gonna have to get up on the chair here because the plumbing is in my way. Okay, I got to be on the other eye. There we go. So banana is something I do as an occasional treat. It usually happens, oops. Usually happens, oh, there we go. It's gone. She's gonna have to go handle it herself. There she goes. She's chasing it like a volleyball. And the Anthias like it. The Purple Tang loves it. They're over there now. Oh, good. It got stuck to the vortex, so they can all snack on it because it's holding onto a pump. And now everyone can get a bite way down there. Let's see. Too many wires. By the time I get this done, it'll be gone. Oh, it's still on the pump. Switch cameras. It's so funny. They're like totally ignoring it now, even though it's in a great spot where they can go get it. They're looking at me. They're thinking I'm going to bring more. Come on, go eat this over here. There you go. I'm going to have to replace this camera. It's just got issues. All right. So those are some of the things I feed them. Yeah, I gotta buy a new camera. That one's just toast. It's awful. It's gonna give you seizures. All right. Let's see. Someone said, just another hour, please. Master of Marine says, I have a yellow spot goby and an 80-gallon tank and would really like a mandarin. Do you think I can keep both in a fairly small tank? I do think you could. I don't believe that they have any problems with each other conflict-wise. And I do think that 80 gallons is big enough to handle the two of them. I don't think that should be too much of a problem. I think I'm going to put this back up here. Spock, you got your piece of banana. That's all you get. So you need a lot of pods. I'd recommend that the tank be at least 9 months old before you put it in. You might need to feed pods to your tank several times, like pour in bottles of pods to kind of build up the population before you add the mandarin, so that mandarin will get plenty of food. It's very important. If you're lucky, the mandarin will learn to like your frozen food or your pellet food and will consume that as well. And if that happens, that's even easier because now you know it will always have a food source. Cannon says, I have 2 clownfish that acted like they were paired up for the last 6 months, but for the last week, one has been a complete bully, chasing the other around the tank daily. Should I be worried? No, maybe slightly concerned. Hopefully it'll calm down and settle down. If it really doesn't resolve itself, if the chase just doesn't seem to stop, you might have to remove one or the other from the tank temporarily, maybe rearrange the rockwork slightly and reintroduce it. Maybe that will get rid of this weird situation that's going on. But that's not guaranteed. That's just, it's a method we use sometimes to solve problems. Marquette says, what are good fish to keep in a frag tank? Any kind of grazer that's an algae eater would be good. So, again, what size the frag tank is matters, because if it's a little tiny thing with 10 gallons, you're going to limit your choices. But, if it's something bigger, like, 60 gallons or so, you could probably look at getting a small coal tang, the yellow tang. Those are a couple algae eaters that will be constantly picking at the egg crate or whatever. Definitely put snails. You might put in peppermint shrimp possibly to work on any potential aptasia problems. I'm trying to think other fish. People have been mentioning the, what is that brackish fish people like to get? They say it helps eat hair algae. I can't think of it right now. I've never got one, so I don't know what it's called. We talked about it last week, but I forgot its name now. Anyway, those are another possible one. They're inexpensive, and you get them to convert over to saltwater, and they can be in there doing their thing. Usually we don't put too many fish in a frag tank, but having some in there is good. A lot of times I see clownfish in frag tanks, which is good because you're feeding those fish, the fish are getting fat, they're pooping all over the corals, and the corals grow. And the corals have color, which is the most important part. Eric says, thank you for the Peacemaker. Copper band is in the reef adapting to the other fish. Works perfectly. Thanks again. Yeah, I love the Peacemaker for introducing fish into your tank because you hang that box in your tank. I make one for rimless tanks, and I make one specifically to fit your tank. So I need to know which one you're buying. And those boxes hang in the tank with the new fish inside it for 3 days. And after 3 days, you can pour that fish out of the box into the reef, and hostility is like non-existent. And this has worked so well for me, and apparently for many of you that have bought Peacemakers. I'm really glad that you're seeing the same results. That was the whole reason I came up with this idea in the first place. Tim says, what in your opinion are some of the more difficult SPS and some of the easier and more hardy? Easier SPS would be Pacillipora, Bird's Nest, Montipora. Those are all pretty easy. And then anything with a ridiculous name with a huge high dollar price tag are difficult. So if you pick something like Home Wrecker and it's $800 a frag, you're going to get a little tiny thing. It probably will die, and you'll be furious you spent $800. So I'm a big fan of $20 frags and $30 frags, you know, something reasonable. And yes, I've bought some. There are 70 and 80 and 100. But I'm just not, I don't chase the names. I don't chase the ridiculous colors because they're so gorgeous. I just know in reality it's not going to look like that to my eye. It just won't. I mean, when I went to visit Matt Dudley in Florida, he had these amazing corals. We wore the orange glasses and they looked fantastic. And I came home with a few of his frags, and a couple didn't make it and a couple did. And one or two kind of kept their color for most of it, but he just has some kind of special cooked up recipe in his water that makes those things look the way they do. And, you know, the more vivid, the more colorful, the more crazy, and like I said, the more expensive, usually the harder they are to keep alive. It's almost like nature of this hobby. You know, you have something disaster happen in your tank, and of course, the cheapest fish you ever bought is the one that survives. It's one of those things. Just another nano tank says he'd like to have Mark make a neat acrylic stand for my Komori X1 doser that I got from the website. Super happy with the doser. Yep. No, I love that thing. I run one too. If you need a stand, let me know. Tell me exactly what you're looking for, and maybe I can make you just what you're asking for. One thing I did was I asked my acrylic supplier to bring me a whole bunch of acrylic next Monday, and they said they would, and I hope they do, and that way I'll have things to do for the next few weeks. Cindy, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, I am working on my bikini body. Yes, that is what it is. You should see the bikini I've got planned for Macna. Actually, it's not going to happen. I did want to show you guys this. This is something most people don't see. This was my view last night when I was having my dinner. So this is my living room space. You can see the TV on the wall. There's my table where I build all my stuff. This wooden table is what we're on right now, actually, for the live stream. I use it every week. And then to the right is the reef tank. To the left is a huge mirror. To the far left is the corner where I work at my desk. And that's where I used to do a lot of my live streams, was sitting at that desk. And I may be going back to that corner at some point because I actually like to be comfortable during these streams because they're so long. But yeah, that's my home. Debbie says, did the vet take measurements of Spock? Yes, she did. It's in a report that I have. It's all going part of the video. And hopefully this next week I can just roll out some videos. I know I say that every week, and every week I really do want to. But I've been putting customers ahead of sitting at a computer playing with playing with video files, because I feel like customers must have their orders filled. If I said, hey, yeah, I was going to build your such and such, but I had to edit all these videos because people on YouTube want it, their heads would explode. So I got to keep things within reason. But I really, I don't know, call it good intentions, call me a liar, I don't know what to do. But I'm doing the best I can with the hours I have each day, and then I need some downtime to relax. It's important, so we don't fall apart. Marine Life says, do you have any tips for getting rid of cyanobacteria because as I remove it, it comes back hours later? Okay, so you must read my cyanobacteria article on my website. That's what you have to do. And that is going to help you because cyanobacteria will always come back a few hours later because that's how it works. It will go away every single night. It'll come back every single day because it's photosynthetic. The lights come on, the cyanobacteria turns red, the lights turn off, it becomes invisible. The next day the lights are on, it turns red. You scoop it out, the next day you have more. That's completely normal. That's all part of cyanobacteria. It's a bacteria. You need to read the article. You need to use ChemiClean or Red Cyano RX to kill it. And you need to follow my directions exactly. And if you do it, in 3 to 5 days, you'll solve this problem and you'll be done. Brackish fish. Anyone do it? Mollies. Thank you. Yes, some people put mollies inside their frag tanks. Thank you very much for telling me that. I hate it when I can't remember those. Kevin James says, should I wait until my dino flagellates are completely gone before adding new live sand? Been battling for a few months with different techniques, seems to be just lingering around still. Yeah, no, I wouldn't add any more sand on top of what you got going on right now. I would try to get the last of it out. You said you use different techniques. I'd actually like to hear what you've used or what's working or what you're thinking about doing to get the last of it out, because once you get it completely gone, then you can do whatever you want with your tank, and your tank should do better. Mikey says, what is a good price to get Maxima clams? Oh, I would say you're probably going to find them around 80 or 90. Well, no, less. Depends on the size. If they're really small, they may be $35 or $45 a piece. If they're bigger, they might be 80 or 90 bucks. It depends who's selling it. Depends what it looks like. You know, obviously, the more fantastic it looks, odds are the price will be a little higher. I have bought Maximas in the past, little tiny ones, for I bought 10 at one time on a trip I was on. I was a little bit bonkers, and I brought them all home with me in the suitcase. And I think I got them for like 35 bucks a piece because I bought 10 at once. And the guy was like, seriously? And I was like, well, I mean, just tell me the price. You know, if I can't afford it, I'm not going to do it. And he was like, $3.50. And I was like, done. And he bagged up all these clams. It was awesome. It was beautiful. And they were in the bottom of this tank. And unfortunately, it was like a few months later, this tank leaked. And all the water drained out, and I lost those clams. Otherwise, I might still have them. Julia says, is there a reason I wasn't accepted in the Facebook group? There's still a whole bunch of people waiting. There's like 200. I got through about 500 people, or about 300 people so far. So there's about 200 pending. Sometimes people aren't accepted if they didn't fill out the questions. There are 3 questions we ask, and if the person doesn't even bother answering them, it's like, why are we going to add you to the group? So that could be a possibility. Don't know. Could be that the profile is so brand new, I don't trust it. That does happen too, because we don't want trolls in there. And somebody that just created a new account so they can get in to cause chaos is not acceptable. But other than that, no real reason. I don't even recognize your name. Let's see. Hey, we're at the bottom of the chat. I got all the questions. That's a miracle. For the last couple of weeks, I had to just give up and say I can't get to the end. It is Water Test Saturday. You should test your water today. You should get all your results, figure out what's going on with your tank, make any adjustments you need to on your doser so that way you have the right numbers. If everything's perfect, keep up the good work. Make sure the tubing on all your dosing pumps is not clogged up. If you can hit like some kind of a prime button, hit it and make sure water trickles out. Hit it, the next one trickles out, next one trickles out. If it's not trickling out, twist the hose between your fingertips so that way any kind of calcification that's happened will break off so flow can come out. Because the worst thing you can have is a doser hooked up to a container full of fluid and nothing's coming out of the tubing because it's clogged. So we want to make sure that that is working properly. Like I said earlier in the stream, because of our downtime, we have a lot of time to tinker with our tanks. Now is the perfect time to inspect every single thing and make sure everything is right, because we want to keep everything happy and humming along the way it should be. If you've taken your protein skimmer apart and cleaned the entire thing, great. If you haven't and you haven't done it in a long time, this might be the perfect week to do that. You can take the skimmer out of your system, keep the tank running, put the skimmer inside a vat with a citric acid and water, and plug the skimmer in and let it skim through the citric acid for, a couple hours, overnight if you want. And then the next day, completely disassemble, clean everything, make sure the orifice where the air sucks into the intake of the pump does not have a block of salt in there. That happens to a lot of people. And what I like to do is take a drill bit and put it in that orifice and twist it by hand to carve out the salt so that it is pure, clean plastic, no rock crystal of salt in there. And that way the air can get into your protein skimmer and do its job. And then when you're all done and you put the skimmer back in, it may overflow because it's working so good again. You'll probably have to make some adjustments to get the water level right within the body and kind of control things and keep an eye on it and adjust it. And then other than that, again, we're going to have another live stream next week because I'm not going anywhere. Is there any desire for live streams midweek night times, anything like that that comes to mind. Some people have been asking me if I could live stream while I'm working. I really don't want to do that because I'll be ignoring the screen and be basically working. And I just don't see the benefit of that, but some people are curious by nature. I don't know. But I really would like to get work done and get videos out next week, and definitely have a nice live stream next Saturday again at 2 o'clock Central Time. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We are down to 264 people. We've lost at least 100 because I was dwindling down, and I don't blame them. We've been talking much too long. And I hope that you guys stay healthy and stay safe and have all kinds of good things to eat at home. Bye, guys.